Chapter 791. 3 days wasn't a long time, but it wasn't a short time either. But to Albus Dumbledore, these 3 days were the happiest and most wonderful time he had had in the past few decades. Because his beloved little sister, Ariana, had once again returned to his side. Like a shy little elf, she accompanied him every day. It was as if time had turned back to the time before the tragedy happened. But just as the saying went, life was made up of all kinds of pain and regret. Good times were always so short. When the deadline arrived, the girl suddenly fell to the ground in pain. Not only was her face frighteningly pale, but her body was also twitching nonstop. No healing magic or potion could work on her. No, 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 don't be so cruel to me. Hold on, Ariana. Albus knelt on the ground and begged in panic. As a magus, he could clearly feel the life force in the girl's body was rapidly draining away. If this situation continued, it wouldn't take more than a few minutes for her to take her last breath and turn into a cold corpse. At this critical moment, Zhangqing finally appeared out of thin air and said in an emotionless voice, "Dear friend, you have about 3 minutes to make your choice. Tell me, do you plan to abandon your poor sister again and continue to work for Abusi? Or do you want to make up for the mistake from decades ago so that Ariana can grow up healthily and live the rest of her life like an ordinary girl?" You are a demon, a true devil," Abphos roared with his blood-red eyes. At this moment, no matter how stupid he was, he knew that this was a trap to force him to betray his brother. But the problem was that he was already deeply trapped and couldn't break free. Ariana Dumbledore's death had always been the greatest pain and regret in the hearts of the two brothers. As time passed, it even surpassed the matter itself and became a strong psychological cue. If he could use his life in exchange for his sister's resurrection, then Albus would definitely not hesitate at all. But now he had to choose between his two loved ones, and the other would pay the price with her life. Nothing could be more cruel, more painful, and more despairing than this. Thank you. I'll take that as a compliment. Also, you have 1 minute and 30 seconds left. Zhang Cheng glanced at the pocket watch in his hand and reminded him softly. Perhaps other people's hearts would soften when they saw the old man's tormented eyes, but he, who had long been cold to the extreme, would definitely not. Damn it, I choose Ariana. Save her. Seeing his sister on the verge of death, Abphos clenched his fists tightly and let out a cry of despair. Very good. You made the right choice. As long as you can get rid of Abusi, you can take your lovely sister away from the chaos and live out the rest of your life in peace. I promise that no one will disturb your peaceful and quiet life," Zhang Cheng said as he took out the prepared medicine and poured it into the girl's mouth. In the blink of an eye, the face of the girl who was still struggling on the brink of death quickly became rosy, and her body gradually returned to normal. Other than the fact that she was still unconscious, there was nothing wrong with her. Phew! Abphos heaved a sigh of relief and quickly wiped away his tears. He put on a cold and unapproachable expression. "Tell me, what do you want me to do? I'll say this first. I'm just a tavern owner and am no match for Abusi. Don't worry, I won't let you kill your own brother. That's too cruel. On the contrary, I only need you to ask Abusi out and then put this little thing on his wrist." With that, Zhang Cheng took out a silver metal bracelet from his pocket. It was embedded with a dozen emeralds that emitted a green glow. "What is this?" Abphos subconsciously asked with a frown. "An interesting little thing. You don't need to know its specific use. Just put it on Abusi's wrist. Don't try to play any tricks. If you have any thoughts that you shouldn't, it's best to think of your lovely sister." Zhang Cheng glanced meaningfully at the unconscious girl. "I'll do as you say, but you'd better keep your promise. If anything happens to Ariana..." Before Abphos could finish, Zhang Cheng interrupted with a smile. "Relax. Do you think I'll do anything overboard to a girl who isn't a threat at all? No, I came with good intentions. You have to know that your brother, in a strict sense, is actually a sinner of the Dumbledore family. It was his extreme obsession with the holy relic of death that led to a series of tragedies. Now it's time to get rid of him and put everything back on track." "Whatever you say. I just want Ariana to live well." The old man sneered and carried the girl to the bedroom on the second floor. Watching his gradually fading figure, Zhang Cheng suddenly turned around without warning and said to the air beside him, "How about it? My prediction was right. He has no right to refuse my request, and he won't watch his sister die for his brother." "Yes, I saw it. Like I said before, you're a real genius at playing with people's hearts. It's simply amazing." With a low and hoarse voice, Voldemort appeared out of thin air on a chair not far away. To be exact, he sat there in an invisible state from the beginning and watched the show from beginning to end. Zhang Cheng pretended to be modest and explained with a smile, "No, it's not that I'm brilliant, but that humans are usually more emotional than rational when dealing with emotional problems. Especially when it comes to family and love. They often can't control themselves. What I did was just using this impulse that arose in a short period of time." Voldemort nodded approvingly. "Interesting point of view. I also saw these flaws, so I abandoned all emotions and let myself become without any worries. Maybe, in my opinion, emotions are a complicated thing. Although they have all kinds of flaws, sometimes they can erupt with unimaginable power. I won't regard emotions as a weakness or a burden, but I won't let them go out of control either. Finally, are you ready to make a clean break with Dumbledore? If nothing unexpected happens, he will stand in front of us in 3 to 5 days at most, and there will be no way to escape." "Haha, of course. I've been looking forward to this day for a long time." Voldemort laughed and opened his arms, his eyes flashing with a terrifying red light. "In that case, I'll leave for a while and go to the United States on the other side of the ocean. Those annoying little bugs are too much of a hindrance. It's time to teach them a memorable lesson and let them understand that in front of absolute power, they can either kneel down and beg for mercy or die." Chapter 792, August 20th, 1995. A special date that was destined to be recorded in the annals of history by both the ordinary people and the magic world. In a dream, calm on this day, Zhang Cheng personally led the pure-blood noble wizards from the United Kingdom to attack the headquarters of the United States Congress of Magic in the Woolworth Building in New York. There was no probing or conversation. There was no so-called pity or sympathy. He directly used the most primitive and violent method to tear apart all the magical defenses and launched a merciless massacre on the wizards who stood in the way of his plan to destroy the world. Regardless of whether they were male or female, old or young, they were all killed in an instant. Corpses could be seen everywhere in the corridor. Due to the space imprisonment spell cast in advance, all connections between this building and the outside world were cut off, so there was no need to worry about anyone using spells such as phantom transference to escape. Standing at the only exit, Zhang Cheng smiled and asked Lucas Malfoy, who was following beside him, "My dear friend, how long do you think it will take to clean up all the little mice?" "Not more than 40 minutes. These American wizards were originally beggars, thieves, criminals, and losers who escaped from the European continent. They had no background at all. Plus, with the powerful spells you provided, it was not difficult to kill them all. In fact, I've always wondered what gave these fellows the courage to resist. Do they think that the gap in magical power can be made up for with numbers?" Lucius raised his head proudly, and his eyes were full of contempt and disdain. Not only him, but the pure-blood, noble wizards around him, who could be casually picked out from 600 to 700 years ago, even thousands of years ago, had the same reaction. They all had a strong sense of superiority. In the world of ordinary people, the United States had used nearly a century to rise and let the world gradually forget that it was originally a colony used to exile criminals and exploit resources. However, in the world of magic, it was far from taking off the hat of shame on its head, especially the former suzerain of the United Kingdom, which had always looked down on the so-called United States Congress of Magic. As it turned out, their disdain was justified. At least in this attack, there was not a single person in the building who could fight. The large number of Luo-Ao law enforcers could not even withstand the first round of attacks. They were completely annihilated by the British Magi, who were less than a third of their number. The rest of the Luo-Ao law enforcers scattered like birds and beasts, trying to use the large and complex terrain to buy time and escape. In any case, due to the relatively small population, the war in the world of magic usually did not kill everyone. Unfortunately, they had underestimated the horror of this attack. As the plan to destroy the world entered the final countdown, Zhang Cheng did not have time to waste on a group of self-righteous idiots playing guerrilla warfare. He wanted to destroy the legal magic government of the United States once and for all, so that they would not be able to form again in a short period of time to cause trouble for him. In this way, the huge arsenal of the United States of America would be in his pocket. It should be noted that in this world, the Soviet Union, one of the two poles of the world, had only fallen 4 years ago. Many powerful hydrogen bombs were still in service, far from the state after repeated reductions and destruction more than a decade later. Just when Zhang Cheng was thinking about how many high-yield nuclear warheads he could take away, Gargsun Gore suddenly dragged a young woman who was struggling and screaming down the stairs. He said with a hideous smile, "Sir, guess what I found? A keeper of secret messages. She can lead us to those muggles who are hidden by magic." "Oh, really?" A surprised expression appeared on Zhang Cheng's face. Ever since they realized that he wanted to control the generals and important members of the ordinary people's government, the United States Congress of Magic had cast a special spell on those targets. Unless they got the secret messages from the Keeper, even if they passed by the target, they would subconsciously ignore them. There was no doubt that although the magic of this world was a lot weaker in terms of lethality and destructive power, other kinds of magic were very developed. "That's right. Bitch, tell me what you know." Gargsun Gore pulled the captive's hair and pushed her to the ground. The woman was obviously terrified. Her whole body was trembling, but she kept her mouth shut and refused to say a word. Looking at her stubborn eyes, Zhang Cheng couldn't help but smile and shake his head. He sighed and said, "Why are you so stubborn, Mayim? The United States Congress of Magic is finished. This country will soon be under our control. Even if you don't want to tell us the secret message, we will only waste a little time at most. But the question is, what good will it do you? It will only make you be killed after suffering a lot of pain. I promise, if you tell me the secret message, you can leave from the only exit behind you alive." "Bah, don't even think about it. You damn demon and executioner. You will get your retribution sooner or later." The woman suddenly raised her head and spat fiercely. "Well, it seems that you have made your choice. But doesn't matter. I am a very patient person, and I'm also very good at persuading others." After saying that, Zhang Cheng gave Gargsun Gore a look. The latter didn't say a word. He raised his magic wand and pointed it at the woman and shouted, "Bone-piercing!" "Ah!" In an instant, an extremely painful wail echoed in the hall. As a Death Eater, Gargsun Gore knew very well how to make a person suffer a fate worse than death. In just a few minutes, the originally young and beautiful captive cried bitterly. Finally, she couldn't help but reveal the secret hidden in the depths of her soul by the loyalty curse. Just like the saying goes, the number of people in the world who can withstand torture is always very small. After getting what he wanted, Zhang Cheng didn't even have the interest to look at the captive. He waved his hand and said, "She is yours. Take her next door and enjoy her." "Thank you for your generosity." Gargsun Gore raised the corner of his mouth and showed an evil smile. He then carried the captive and walked into an office not far away. After a while, his excited roar and the woman's panic scream came out from inside. Almost everyone who knew Gargsun Gore understood what was happening in the office at the moment. After a full 20 minutes, when he walked out, his whole body exuded a cruel and violent aura. He was also holding a bloody lace shorts in his hand. "Gargsun, I have an important task for you." Zhang Cheng handed over a piece of parchment paper with an address and a name written on it. "Bring a few people and control the targets on the list. Don't kill anyone. I need them alive, understand?" "Understood. It is my honor to be able to serve you." Gorn placed one hand on his chest and bowed deeply. Chapter 793. In the world of Harry Potter, how fragile was an ordinary government without the protection of magic? Just look at the state of the United States now. The United States became the only superpower in the world after the fall of the Soviet Union. It was also the undisputed leader in the fields of economy, military, scientific research, culture, and other fields. Now, it had become a toy for the pure-blood British wizards. In the president's office in the White House, the political heart of the United States of America, Zhang Cheng was sitting in the chair that originally belonged to the president. He admired the two black suitcases that were 45 centimeters long, 35 centimeters wide, and 25 centimeters high placed on the table. A faint smile appeared on his face. Obviously, this thing was nothing else but the nuclear password suitcase that was called a rugby ball by the outside world. The documents stored inside showed the number of nuclear weapons in the United States, their deployment locations, launch routes, and base lists. One of the suitcases was kept by the President of the United States for a long time, while the other was kept by the Secretary of Defense. Once the launch process began, both sides had to take out the password in the suitcase and send it to the battle command. Then, a new set of passwords will be mixed by the communication center and transmitted to each launch platform through a special communication frequency. Finally, it had to be verified to ensure that there were no errors before it could be launched. After all, as a powerful force that could wipe human civilization off the surface of the Earth, nuclear weapons were not something that could be casually used in actual combat. In order to ensure that the world would not be destroyed by a madman or madman, every nuclear power added layers of insurance to the nuclear power in their hands. Unless the country was on the verge of extinction, it would never be used easily. But unfortunately, no matter how strict the restrictions were, the final decision would always be made by humans themselves. And for the wizards, controlling ordinary people was easier than eating and drinking. In less than 5 days, almost all of the nuclear warheads in the United States have been taken out and secretly sent to the corresponding launch platforms. Now, as long as the order was given, the President of the United States, the Secretary of Defense, and the high-level elites controlled by the soul-seizing spell would join forces to start the first and also the last thermonuclear war in human history. Of course, before this, Zhang Cheng did not forget to personally go to the warehouse and take a lot of large-yield hydrogen bomb warheads that had just been maintained and could be stored for another 10 years. To a certain extent, he had already obtained everything he wanted according to his original plan. There was only one last step left. Just as he was hesitating whether to directly destroy the world and leave, or wait until Voldemort, Dumbledore, and Harry Potter had a love-hate relationship, Lucius Malfoy suddenly rushed in from outside and shouted, "Not good. Dumbledore just rescued the President and the Minister of Defense from us a few minutes ago." "Oh, did he really make a move?" Zhang Qing picked up his cup and took a sip of coffee. He didn't seem surprised at all. "Damn it, you're still in the mood for coffee? Without these two, what will happen to our plan?" Lucius slammed the table impatiently. After all, he was already in deep trouble. If the plan failed, the best outcome would be to be locked up in Azkaban and be accompanied by soul catchers for the rest of his life. "Relax, I've already prepared the compound decoction in advance. All of Dumbledore's actions are expected." Zhang Cheng absent-mindedly placed 2 glass bottles on the table. Perhaps for ordinary people, without the President and the Minister of Defense, it was absolutely impossible to successfully launch a nuclear weapon. But for wizards, this was just a trivial inconvenience, especially after sufficient preparation. Staring at the compound decoction in the bottle, Lucius suddenly realized something and quickly asked, You knew that Dumbledore would interfere with our plan?" Zhang Qing nodded with a playful expression. "Yes, I knew. After all, the fall of the United States of Magic is such a big matter. It would be strange if he didn't take any action. But don't worry, his life will soon come to an end. Then what should we do next?" Lucius's tone was full of uncertainty. "It's very simple. Leave half of the people to continue controlling the country's upper echelons and leave for Russia. Remember, you only have a week at most. Regardless of whether it succeeds or not, the plan will start as usual after a week. At that time, the whole world will be reborn under the purification of thermonuclear weapons." "Got it." At the same time, on the other side of the ocean in England, Voldemort was teaching Harry Potter all kinds of powerful and evil spells. This savior, who was deeply immersed in pain and hatred, had long abandoned his last bit of conscience and used ordinary people captured from the surrounding areas to practice his spells. In just over half a month, his hands were stained with the blood of innocents. Through experiencing slaughter and death at close range, the power of his death curse increased dramatically day by day. He could even defeat most Death Eaters in a one-on-one duel. With such an astonishing growth rate, even the Dark Lord could not help but give a very high evaluation, let alone the Death Eaters who had been beaten to the point of no return. Needless to say, Voldemort wanted to train Harry to be his assistant so that he could give Albus Dumbledore a big surprise in the upcoming great battle. On the other hand, Ron, who had returned home, used a special channel to continuously send out the information he had obtained from his parents. The pitiful creatures who had joined the Phoenix Society were completely unaware that their every move had been firmly grasped by the enemy. Even Abphos had secretly betrayed the organization and was secretly looking for an opportunity to put that unknown magic bracelet on his elder brother. Damn it, the outside world is getting worse day by day. Arthur Weasley, who had dragged his tired body back home, rubbed his eyebrows and complained in a low voice. Ever since he had been fired by the English Ministry of Magic, he had lost his source of income and could not find a job. His life at home was getting worse day by day. In addition, he had to help Dumbledore carry out some dangerous missions. His entire person was about to collapse. Relax, my dear. I believe in you and Dumbledore. We will definitely be able to get through this. Molly hurriedly comforted her husband. I hope so. The current situation is not good for us. Since the United States of Magic has fallen, Dumbledore issued an emergency call today to prepare for a full-scale war. Arthur sighed helplessly. Emergency call? God, the situation is already so bad. Do you want me to send the children away first? It's too late. We have to leave tonight. The address is... Just as the Weasleys were fiercely discussing emergency measures, they did not realize that Ron was hiding in a dark corner of the stairs and watching them. He then recorded every word and quietly stuffed it into an inconspicuous leather pocket. Chapter 794. Late at night, the strong sea breeze blew water vapor from the Atlantic Ocean and swept across England, bringing a storm to this unique country that wandered on the edge of Europe. Standing in front of the window of a dilapidated house on the outskirts of London, Albus Dumbledore stared blankly at the rain pitter-patter on the glass window. One of his hands clenched the Elder's wand hidden in his sleeve. As a self-proclaimed wise man, he had never been so worried about the future as he was now. Because this time, the Phoenix Society that he established and led not only had to face the danger from the magic world, but also pay attention to the changes in the world government of the ordinary people. No one knew why the pureblood wizards of unknown identities attacked the United States Congress of Magic, let alone why they wanted to control the United States government. However, one thing was for sure, and that was that this incident was enough to cause the governments of the world to be wary of the adepts. Once this incident was exposed, it would instantly worsen the relationship between the adepts and the adepts, which was already on the verge of calming down. Even in the era when Gellert, Grindelwald, and Voldemort were rampant, things were far from as bad as now. To be precise, this was no longer a simple matter within the magic world, but a great crisis enough to threaten the entire world. Sigh. After a slight sigh, Dumbledore turned and asked Maleva McGonagall, who was not far away, "How is it? Are all our people here?" The latter nodded without hesitation. "Yes, they're all here. Are you sure you want to take them on this adventure? You know, the enemy is countless times stronger than us. Almost 1/3 of the pure-blood nobles in England are standing on the opposite side of us. There is no other way. We have to take risks. Only by taking risks can we win, so that the world will not be shrouded in darkness. I understand that many people may be hurt and sacrificed this time, but..." Before Dumbledore could finish speaking, a dozen masked Death Eaters appeared outside the house out of thin air. The leader was none other than his old friend, Voldemort, who had been entangled with him for many years. But what was ironic was that Harry Potter, whom he had once nurtured as a savior, was now standing beside the Dark Devil King. His eyes were overflowing with rage and hatred. Damn it! How did they know we were here? Maliva McGonagall's pupils constricted. In order to ensure the safety of every member of the Phoenix Society, no matter if it was the name list or the hiding place, everything was protected by magic. Before she could react, Ab Foss, who had been motionless in the corner, suddenly stood up and put a jade bracelet on his elder brother's wrist. Crack! In an instant, all of the emeralds glowed with a dazzling light, quickly forming mysterious magical runes that covered Busey's aged skin. Aberforth, what are you doing? Arthur Weasley, who had just rushed down the stairs, pushed him aside and questioned him loudly. The others also stood up and pointed their wands at Busey's younger brother, their eyes full of vigilance. I'm sorry, brother, but in order for Ariana to live happily, I'm willing to do anything, even if it means becoming a despicable traitor. Aberforth took a deep breath and looked up at everyone with a calm gaze. Did you reveal our location? Maliva McGonagall seemed to realize something, and her voice trembled a little. But interestingly, Aberforth shook his head and denied, No, I didn't reveal our location to anyone. My task was to put that magic bracelet on Busey's wrist, that's all. What? Besides you, there's another traitor among us? Maliva McGonagall felt a chill run down her spine, and she quickly turned back to stare at the others in the house. She couldn't understand why there were so many traitors in the Phoenix Society, which had always been known for its unity and loyalty. The enemy was right in front of them. Everyone was in a panic. It could be said that there was no worse situation than this. In contrast, Dumbledore's reaction was much calmer. After feeling the effect of the bracelet on him, he quickly stopped Maliva McGonagall's plan to ask who the traitor was. He frowned and probed. You seem to have mentioned Ariana just now. Can you tell me what's going on? If I remember correctly, our sister died a few decades ago. Yes, she died. She was killed by our stupidity, but someone brought her back to life. Do you know? Well, the 14-year-old Ariana appeared in front of me. How excited was I? Aberforth couldn't help but shed tears as he spoke. Resurrected? Someone resurrected Ariana. Dumbledore could no longer keep his calm, and he became furious. Everyone had a forbidden zone in their hearts that no one was allowed to touch. And for him, the accidental death of his sister due to his negligence was the eternal pain in the deepest part of his heart. But now, not only did someone expose this pain, but they also didn't forget to sprinkle a handful of salt on it. Anyone would be so angry that they would lose their mind. Just as Aberforth opened his mouth to say something, the door suddenly exploded into pieces with a loud bang. Following that, Voldemort walked in with his subordinates from outside. He first inspected the members of the Phoenix Society in the house, and a cold smile quickly appeared on his face. Yes, you're all here. After tonight, the world will usher in a new chapter. Do you think you've won? Dumbledore took a step forward and blocked the others behind him. Isn't it? Voldemort pursed his lips and asked. No, you can't win. As long as there is light and hope in people's hearts, your selfish and evil intentions will inevitably fail. With that, the old man raised his magic wand and prepared to fight to the death. Due to the binding of the magic bracelet, he knew that this time he couldn't escape as easily as last time. The only thing he could do was to cause as much damage to the enemy as possible before he died. Voldemort undoubtedly saw through Dumbledore's thoughts, and a cruel expression appeared on his face. He gently patted Harry Potter's shoulder and said softly, Go, child, go and vent the pain and anger in your heart. He's yours today. Go to hell, old bastard, hellfire. With the furious roar of the boy who survived the great disaster, the curtains of the final battle finally opened. Regardless of whether it was the members of the Phoenix Society or the Death Eaters who followed the Black Devil King, they all found their own opponents and began to release various powerful offensive spells. For a moment, the sound of explosions, screams, and shouts broke the silence of the midnight and echoed in the air above this dilapidated house. Chapter 795. Harry, tell me, how did you become like this today? Have you forgotten that Voldemort is the murderer of your parents? Dumbledore skillfully used defensive magic to block the boy's crazy attacks while trying to figure out what was going on. At the end of the previous semester, although the two of them were not on good terms because of the issue of philosophy and could even be said to have parted ways, it was far from the point of falling out and becoming enemies. But now, Harry Potter was like a madman, trying to trade his life for Dumbledore's several times, completely not caring about his own life, as if he was the enemy who killed his parents. Shut up. I don't need you to care about my affairs. The boy obviously did not want to talk too much nonsense, and raised his hand to cast a powerful death curse. It was unknown whether it was the effect of strong negative emotions or the mutation induced by the power of creation. But in short, the power of the attack spells he released was far stronger than most people, especially the killing spells of the necromancy like Avatar's death. Boom! The green light shattered the magical protection on Dumbledore's body, and the shock wave of the explosion forced him to take a few steps back before he could stabilize his body. Seeing this scene, Voldemort, who was standing at the side, immediately laughed and mocked. Ha ha ha! How does it feel? You always keep saying that justice will prevail over evil, and light will prevail over darkness. But now, you're actually being forced to retreat by a boy who embraces darkness. There has never been a difference between good and evil in this world, only winners and losers. Perhaps when I rule the magical world, I will consider having someone write a biography of you, called Dumbledore the Deceiver. Tom, have you now fallen so low that you only know how to hide behind a boy and talk nonsense? The old man narrowed his eyes, trying to provoke his real opponent. Don't worry, my dear Dumbledore. We have plenty of time tonight. After all, before enjoying a big meal, it is very necessary to have some appetizers first. Also, don't underestimate Harry Potter, or you will suffer a great loss. After saying that, Voldemort sat down on the chair next to him, picked up the teapot, poured himself a cup of hot tea, and leisurely took a sip. Abphos, who had long made up his mind to betray his brother, took the initiative to come to the side and asked in a sad tone, "What about that Easterner? I have completed my task. Now it is time for him to fulfill his promise." I have a slightly different opinion on this matter. The corners of Voldemort's mouth curled up slightly. I think you can do more. For example, join forces with Harry Potter to defeat Abusi. No, I refuse. This is different from what we agreed on. Abphos roared in anger. Do you think you still have the right to talk about conditions? No, you don't have any right. If you don't want her lovely sister to die, you'd better do as I say. Voldemort's eyes flashed with a terrifying red light. Ever since he witnessed Zhang Cheng's ability to manipulate people's hearts, he felt that his previous methods of relying on pure violence and fear to achieve his goals were simply too weak. He couldn't help but want to give it a try. Bastard, how dare you break your promise? Abphos was trembling with anger, but he did not dare to disobey the other party's orders. He turned around, drew his wand, and joined the battle. After all, for something like betrayal, as long as the first step was taken, the psychological barrier for the second and third steps would be much smaller. Seeing his biological brother become his enemy, the anger in Abphos' heart was unimaginable. The flames in his eyes could almost melt steel. But the problem was whether it was out of familial affection or rationality, he could not kill the two people in front of him. Thus, he could only rely on the power of the Elder's wand to continuously release non-lethal spells to knock them down as soon as possible. Voldemort smiled happily as he enjoyed the sight of his sworn enemy being unable to vent his anger. Just as he was about to continue provoking Dumbledore with words, a white light suddenly flashed in the air. Following that, a teleportation door tore through space. The next second, Zhang Cheng walked out from the other side of the door and pretended to be surprised as he teased. "Oh my God, I thought I was going to miss this wonderful show. I didn't expect to be able to catch it in time. My dear friend, you came at the right time. The show has just begun. Come, have a cup of hot tea and slowly enjoy the process." Voldemort poured another cup of tea and handed it over as he spoke. "Thank you." Zhang Cheng politely thanked him and then began to inspect the situation around him. Obviously, as the attacking side, the Death Eaters had firmly grasped the situation and compressed the members of the Phoenix Society into a very small space. If there were no accidents, victory was only a matter of time. The only variable now was Abphos Dumbledore. As an old fox who had lived for hundreds of years and was known as one of the two most powerful wizards in the world, no one knew what kind of trump card he was hiding. This was also the reason why Voldemort was unwilling to personally take part in the battle. In any case, magic had a considerable amount of uncertainty. No one could be sure what would happen before the end of the battle. The most classic example and negative example was when Voldemort invaded the Potter family. In the end, he unexpectedly fell at the feet of a newborn baby. Curses, especially ancient curses that required self-sacrifice as a condition, would often affect and trigger some extremely powerful forces. Having suffered a loss once, he was not sure if Dumbledore would drag him down with him before his death, so he was not willing to take the risk. After understanding this point, Zhang Chung quietly touched the magic ring on his finger. The sparkling and translucent diamond flashed with an imperceptible light before quickly returning to normal. It didn't attract anyone's attention at all. About 2 to 3 minutes later, Voldemort suddenly asked without warning, "How's the matter in America?" "It's done. Now the button to restart the world is in our hands. As long as you nod, we can immediately kill more than 90% of the ordinary people on this planet." Zhang Chung replied without hesitation. "Is that so? That's great. Dear Dumbledore, you may not know, but we have taken control of something called nuclear weapons in the ordinary world. It can destroy all the densely populated cities in a few hours, and billions of people will die in this disaster." In order to force the enemy to reveal their trump card as soon as possible, Voldemort took the initiative to reveal the plan of the two of them joining forces to destroy the world. He believed that with Abphos Dumbledore's personality, he would be furious upon hearing this plan and completely abandon his last trace of rationality. Even if it meant risking his life, he would stop the disaster from happening. Chapter 796. Bastard, are you crazy? How dare you do such a thing? You'll destroy the world. As expected, when Albus Dumbledore heard that Voldemort was going to destroy the world, he finally realized the severity of the situation. He immediately unleashed 100% of the Elder Wand's power, defeating Harry Potter and his brothers in a matter of seconds. Especially the few powerful chain curses, they were simply dazzling and did not give his opponents any time to react. Obviously, time and aging did not cause him to lose the favor of magic. It was just that he was not willing to reveal his powerful side until the critical moment. Although great power could win awe and respect, it would inevitably bring about some side effects. For example, he would be placed in a high position by the ordinary people and be completely isolated from the lower class. He would no longer be able to understand their inner thoughts like a friend. And this was precisely the result that Dumbledore did not want to see the most. To a certain extent, although human society had been constantly promoting freedom and equality, it still maintained a strict hierarchy. No matter what kind of country system it was always made up of the ruling class and the ruled class. Only a fool would believe that the former would serve the latter. On the contrary, everything that the ruler did for the ruled was actually to ease conflicts and maintain the stability of their rule, ensuring that the latter would never rebel or start a rebellion to overthrow the current regime. Albus Dumbledore understood this point very well, so he always placed himself in a very special position. He was not overly close to the bureaucrats of the Ministry of Magic, but he also did not create a strong sense of distance. Compared to showing off his power, he preferred to use another method to influence others. Look, this is your true self behind the hypocritical mask. Seeing that the pawn he sent out to test the waters had fallen, Voldemort finally stood up and joined the battle that would decide the fate of the human world. Unfortunately, Dumbledore had already realized that no amount of nonsense would change anything. The only thing that could change the situation was the Elder's Wand, which was known as one of the sacred weapons of death. The two of them looked into each other's eyes, and the battle was about to break out, But before either of them could make the first move, two figures suddenly braved the heavy rain and rushed in from outside. It was Hermione Granger and Ron Weasley. The former did not hesitate at all and rushed in front of Zhang Cheng. She stood on her tiptoes and gave him a passionate kiss. After a full minute, she panted and said, "According to your request, everything is ready." "Well done. You're more capable than I thought. Now, it's time to reveal the final mystery and let these poor fellows know why they lost." After saying this, Zhang Cheng's eyes flashed with undisguised malice, and he pushed the girl in his arms. He patted Ron's shoulder lightly and asked with a faint smile, "Do you still remember our agreement?" "Of course." The boy raised his head, his face full of anticipation. Zhang Cheng nodded his head in satisfaction. "Great. Now go and do what you need to do. I promise you'll get what you want very soon." "Damn it, Ron, what the devil is this?" demanded Arthur Weasley at the top of his voice. As a loyal follower of Dumbledore, he could not believe that his youngest son was standing on the enemy's side and seemed to have reached an unspeakable deal. "Father, have you finally remembered that I'm your son?" Ron's tone was full of sarcasm. "Ron, watch your attitude. He's your father." As a mother, Molly sensed that something was wrong and immediately reprimanded him. "Ha ha! You only have eyes for the capable Bill, the excellent Percy, the mischievous Fred, and George Weasley. When did you pay attention to me? Even Ginny gets more love than I do." "That's right. I was the one who eavesdropped on your conversation. Then I told someone else about this place." With unbridled laughter, Ron finally vented all the dissatisfaction he had accumulated over the years. Jealousy, intense jealousy. As the saying goes, there is no harm without comparison. Compared with his siblings, he was undoubtedly the one who was most easily ignored. If he had not become friends with Harry Potter in the first grade, no one would have remembered the name Ron Weasley. Do you know what you've done? I'm going to kill you." Arthur obviously could not accept this fact. He raised his fist and punched at his youngest son's face. But before he could get close, one of Ron's arms suddenly mutated and easily caught the fist. He sneered and said sarcastically, "Save your strength, father. I'm not who I used to be. You're no match for me. Get out of my way. I still have work to do." As soon as he finished speaking, he swung his strong, mutated arm and threw Arthur into the corner. Then he grabbed Maliva McGonagall at lightning speed and said in a motionless tone, "Sorry, Professor. Say goodbye to this world." "No, stop. Don't do it." Molly screamed crazily. Crack. The boy ignored his mother's fierce reaction and directly broke Maliva McGonagall's neck. "Clap, clap, clap, clap. Very wonderful. I'm very satisfied with your performance, Ron. In return, your parents can survive this war. Of course, the premise is that you have to erase part of your memory." Zhang Cheng applauded and praised with a smile. Friends turned against each other, and father and son became enemies. He did not know why, but this kind of thing that completely stimulated the dark side of human nature made him feel addicted. "Thank you." Ron bowed slightly and immediately took out his magic wand and pointed it at his parents. Forget everything. In an instant, two strong lights hit Arthur and Molly's eyes, and the two of them immediately fell into a trance. After a while, they slowly recovered and looked around with puzzled eyes. Obviously, they did not remember a lot of things. At the same time, Harry Potter, who had just been knocked down, woke up from his stupor. He quickly picked up his wand and stared at Dumbledore, who was fighting fiercely with Voldemort with a vicious gaze. Then he took advantage of a gap, and with a twisted expression, he chanted a fatal spell, "Piercing Ice." Boom! A huge ice ball suddenly exploded under the old man's feet, directly freezing his feet in place and making him unable to move. If it was under normal circumstances, it would only take a little time to solve this little problem. But the problem was, would the enemy give him time? The answer was no. Voldemort seized this opportunity and turned his magic wand into a sharp black sword, stabbing it into his chest. Chapter 797. Drip, drip, drip. Crimson blood quickly soaked through his clothes and dripped from the tip of the sword that was stolen from his back. There was no doubt that this attack had directly pierced through Albus Dumbledore's heart. Now, as long as the sword was pulled out, he would immediately die of massive blood loss within a few seconds. No one could stop the arrival of death. This was because this was not a simple transformation magic, but a vicious, undead magic. The black sword was not an ordinary sword in the sense of the word, but carried a fatal curse. Any unlucky person who was stabbed would never be able to heal normally, even with healing potions and curses. Well done, Potter. Voldemort, who felt that victory was in his grasp, was not in a hurry to kill his opponent. Instead, he turned to the savior and nodded approvingly. Only after personally experiencing the full power of the Elder's Wand did he understand why Dumbledore was called the greatest wizard of the era. Although he had a stronger body than before when he was resurrected, he still did not have any advantage in the battle just now. If not for the successful sneak attack at the end, it would have been difficult to determine the winner without a few hours of fighting. However, Harry Potter, who was blinded by hatred, obviously did not have the time to pay attention to the praise of the Dark Lord. He went straight to the front, raised his wand, and snarled, "I swore. I will let you taste the ultimate pain. Now it's time to redeem my vow. Heart-piercing bone." Dumbledore screamed and fell to the ground with a plop, letting out a miserable cry. No one could withstand the intense pain caused by the heart-piercing curse. This curse did not affect the body, but directly affected the mind and soul. Just when Harry Potter wanted to vent his anger and hatred by torturing his opponent, another clone that looked exactly like Dumbledore silently appeared in the dilapidated house. He aimed at the boy and chanted the same curse, "Heart-piercing bone." There was no surprise. The savior also fell directly on the dusty floor and curled into a ball in pain. His eyes were wide open, as if he could not believe that there were two Dumbledore in his sight. My God, this is the most interesting thing I've ever seen in my life. Look at this pitiful little fellow. He doesn't even know what's going on. Voldemort opened his arms and laughed maniacally. Conspiracy, betrayal, deceit. To him, all of this was simply a carnival of revenge. Whether it was Dumbledore or the self-righteous savior, they were all just pawns being played and manipulated. As the instigator of all this, Zhang Chung squatted down with a smile on his face. He looked into Harry Potter's angry eyes and said meaningfully, "I think you must want to figure out the situation now, right?" The answer was simple. "I used genetic technology to clone a copy of Dumbledore, and the person who attacked you and killed Zhang Qiu was not Dumbledore himself, but his copy. Besides, do you really think that Zhang Qiu has fallen in love with you? No, that poor girl is also under my control. Why? Why are you doing this to me?" Harry struggled to raise his head, his eyes full of shock and confusion. "Why? Of course, it was to use you to deal with Albus Dumbledore. Now that my goal has been achieved, you are naturally useless. But I won't kill you. On the contrary, I will let you live well and live in pain and regret for the rest of your life. Do you know? Many people say that the world is full of hope, but in fact, the truth is despairing. I like the world of darkness, and I like to appreciate the ugliness of those who are full of hope but eventually fall into darkness." After saying that, Zhang Chung pushed up his glasses, turned around, and looked at the old man who was holding on to his last breath. The old man exuded a strong aura of death, but his eyes were still firm, without a trace of fear or hesitation, as if he had already expected this day to come. "Dear Mr. Principal, you don't seem to realize what I'm going to do to you, do you?" Zhang Chung slightly raised the corner of his mouth, revealing a cruel smile. "No matter what you do, it can no longer affect me, because death is an irreversible process. Once I die, no matter what you do, it has nothing to do with me." Dumbledore endured the severe pain and responded, No. Death is not an irreversible process, at least not for me. Next, I will pull your soul out of your body and then imprison it in a space of despair that is completely isolated from the outside world. I'm curious, in this environment, how long can you last before you go crazy? According to the principle of the interaction between energy, the purer, kinder, and nobler a person is when they are alive, the more evil, twisted, and sick their soul will be after they die. As he said this, Zhang Cheng took out the black crystal that he had already prepared. He activated the unique ability of Azeroth's warlocks, soul absorption, and forcibly pulled Albus Dumbledore, who had not yet died, out of his body. Because there was no disguise, everyone present clearly saw this scene, especially Voldemort. This was especially so for Voldemort. His pupils constricted, and he quickly reminded him in a slightly hoarse voice, "My friend, this matter is different from what we've discussed. Haha, don't you understand? Your Excellency, the Dark Lord. In fact, you're no different from Dumbledore. You are just a pawn in my hands." As the last word escaped his mouth, Zhang Cheng raised his right index finger and gently fiddled with the air. Bang! The blood vessels in Voldemort's body suddenly burst open, and a large amount of black and red blood with a strong stench splashed out. The clone and Ron next to him also attacked without hesitation, overturning the Death Eaters in the old house who had not yet reacted to the situation. In the blink of an eye, the winner who had been flaunting his might had become a prisoner. You did something to the resurrection ceremony. Why didn't I feel it? Voldemort narrowed his eyes and gritted his teeth as he questioned. Remember the black liquid in the glass container and the arm that Ron cut off? These things contain a kind of energy called the power of creation, and I am the source, creator, and controller of this energy. Now, every drop of blood and every cell in your body is under my control. As long as I want to, I can make you die in a few seconds at any time. Zhang Cheng casually explained. In fact, in the research of the power of creation, he had made breakthroughs and even launched an interesting human completion project. After more than 90% of the world population was wiped out by thermonuclear weapons, Hermione Granger would launch a low-Earth orbit satellite to release a filtered and optimized power of creation in the clouds all over the world, and then spread it through rain to the 7 continents and 4 oceans. In this way, it would not be long before all the life forms on Earth that were lucky enough to survive would slowly evolve a variety of magic abilities, and even ordinary people would have the potential to become wizards. Chapter 798. What are you trying to do? Severus Snape couldn't help but question loudly as he watched Voldemort's blood vessels explode before being frozen into a solid block of ice by the ultra-low temperature magic. He originally thought that this mysterious Easterner had joined forces with the Dark Lord to rule the entire magical world, but now it seemed like that wasn't the case. What am I trying to do? That's a good question. Zhang Cheng smiled as he extended a finger. Perhaps you won't believe me when I say this, but I didn't have a clear goal. I just wanted to do some research in peace. However, the method of using slaughter to create soul tools gave me a huge inspiration. Thus, I decided to use the deaths of more than 90% of the world's humans to pry into the mysteries behind death. As for building a world completely ruled by magi, it was just an excuse for the pure-blooded nobles to contribute their strength. I never really had such plans, but I wouldn't stop them from realizing their dreams. Just to pry into the secrets of death. You want to destroy the entire world? Snape widened his eyes in disbelief. Zhang Cheng shrugged nonchalantly. Of course. Isn't this reason enough? You have to understand that death is the most basic rule of this world, and even the entire universe. It is also a powerful force that no human or god can resist. As long as you can control it, even a small part of it is worth it. Furthermore, with the development of technology, humans have always thought that they're the most special species on this planet, the only intelligent life beyond the control of nature. In fact, that's not the case. What are you trying to say? Snape subconsciously furrowed his brows. Don't rush, let me finish. Zhang Cheng waved his hand lightly and continued. In the earliest stages of the birth of life on Earth, most of the life forms were anaerobic. They produced oxygen continuously through their own metabolism, changing the ecological environment of this planet. Due to the lack of restriction and balance, the oxygen content in the air soared from the initial low level to the level where it could poison most anaerobic life forms to death. This also meant that the unlimited reproduction and expansion of anaerobic life forms brought about the first mass extinction in the history of life. How is it Doesn't it sound similar to the development of humans? In fact, with the current speed of technological development, it is impossible for humans to enter the era of space colonization before exhausting all of Earth's resources. With the growth of the human population, sooner or later, they will self-destruct just like the anaerobic life forms on Earth. In the great evolution of life, humans aren't as special as they think. Thus, what I am doing is just to add some interesting variables in the process. As for the outcome, let's leave it to time. Oh, I almost forgot. In a few minutes, the first thermonuclear missile detonates above London. I sincerely invite all of you to witness this spectacular scene. As soon as he finished his sentence, bright spots of light suddenly streaked across the horizon, tearing through the thick dark clouds in the sky as they flew straight towards the main cities of the British Isles. Instead, it's twos to S. TS des. S's of us twos, of steet. Dings to his twos to the tis t. Woo woo woo. Unlike the usual air raid sirens, the sirens this time were particularly hurried. It was like a triple helix that kept repeating, giving people the feeling that the end of the world had arrived. But in fact, it was no different from the end of the world. This air raid siren meant a nuclear missile attack. It wasn't like the German air raid bombing of England in World War II. Not long after, the first warhead finally detonated near the entrance of the River Thames. Instantly, a huge fireball that was several times brighter than the sun rose into the air, vaporizing all life and buildings around it. A terrifying shockwave spread rapidly from the center. Whether it was the high-rise buildings built in modern times or the ancient streets, they all turned into dust. Nothing was spared. Boom! When the fireball expanded to its maximum size, a deafening sound was finally heard. Shock. It was an indescribable shock, especially the wizards who didn't care about the world of ordinary people. It was the first time they realized that the ordinary people they looked down on had unknowingly mastered such a powerful weapon. I'm sorry, I might have to excuse myself for a moment. Zhang Cheng bowed slightly and quickly disappeared from where he stood. The next second, he appeared directly on the space station in Earth's orbit, which was more than 400 kilometers above the ground. He looked down at the bright flames on the surface of Earth and muttered to himself in a voice that only he could hear, "Destruction and death. What a beautiful picture. Come, rule of death, let me see your true face." There is no doubt that the hydrogen bomb was the most powerful weapon ever invented by mankind. With tens of thousands of nuclear warheads detonating one after another around the world, almost all the cities were completely destroyed in the first round of attack. More than 2 billion people disappeared forever. Not even complete corpses were left behind. When hundreds of millions of souls gathered together, an invisible force finally revealed itself, guiding them slowly into the depths of the Earth's core. Earth's core? Interesting. Zhang Cheng's eyes lit up when he noticed this, because he realized that he seemed to have discovered an incredible secret, an undeniable pleasant surprise. Without any hesitation, he directly attached his consciousness to his soul and passed through the Earth's crust, following the large group to the final destination. As the surroundings were dark and there was no light at all, his perception of time became more and more blurred. Most importantly, the souls of the ordinary people who died began to lose their memories and self-awareness during this long journey. They gradually evolved into an extremely pure and special form. Just as Zhang Cheng was developing a strong curiosity about this phenomenon, the great migration of souls finally stopped. At the center of the deepest part of the Earth's core, which was thousands or even tens of thousands of degrees Celsius, there was a golden light spot that was constantly pulsating. The souls of the dead jumped into it one by one like moths to a flame. Every time it swallowed 10,000 souls, the light spot would become more dazzling, as if it had evolved and sublimated to some extent. Chapter 799. What was this? An astral soul in the process of being nurtured? Or an unawakened creator? Or some kind of higher life form that had never been seen before? Zhang Cheng watched everything that was happening in front of him and fell in a deep thought. He could feel that the golden light spot was not the law of death that he was looking for, at least not completely. But what was incredible was that this thing had forcibly seized control of the law of death of the entire planet and allowed the souls of all the dead, especially the souls of intelligent life forms, to come here and become food for its own growth. No consciousness, no communication, and no so-called intelligence. The golden light spot was like a newly formed, fertilized egg that only had an extreme desire for nutrition. It was so weak, but so powerful that it was of a higher level than any creature on this planet. This was a difference in the nature of life, a kind of innate control over energy. Soon, under its insatiable hunger, billions of human souls were devoured, and Zhongcheng's consciousness returned to his body and began to hesitate about what to do next. Obviously, the golden light spot that was protected by layers of solid crust and high-temperature mantle, outer core and inner core, was not as easy to absorb as the astral soul in the world of Azeroth. He could not even be sure what kind of side effects would occur if he rashly absorbed power from it. But one thing was certain. As long as he could find a way to take it for himself, he would have the capital to fight against the Creator. As a person who aspired to surpass everything and stand at the top of all life forms, Zhang Cheng did not like the current state of being controlled by others at all. Although this kind of control was very vague and loose, and there were even generous gifts, being controlled was being controlled, and no matter what, it would not change. He hated this kind of unequal relationship, and he hated the woman treating him like a child even more. Although he did not reject the idea of opening the seal and personally releasing the Creator who had been expelled from that world. It seems that I need to change my plan and stay a little longer. Muttering to himself in a low voice, Zhongqing finally made the decision to use ultra-long-distance teleportation magic to leave the space station and return to the ground. As for the astronauts in the space station, he had already killed them and thrown them outside, turning them into space garbage that floated around the Earth's orbit. Time flew, and in the blink of an eye, for months had passed. Ever since the thermonuclear warheads licked all the densely populated areas around the world, the governments of the various countries basically existed in name only. Even the so-called upper-class elites did not have time to escape into the prepared shelters. The reason was simple. Never in their wildest dreams did they expect a nuclear war to break out without warning. Moreover, there was no warning from the radar, and the anti-missile system was like a decoration. In just a few hours, human beings had gone from being the most populous species in the world to a tragic state of having less than 100 million people. Furthermore, this number was still rapidly decreasing due to nuclear pollution and the lack of basic food and medicine. It was estimated that it would not be long before only about 30 million people could barely adapt to the increasingly harsh living environment. Of course, this was not the worst for ordinary people. The worst thing was that a group of people who called themselves wizards began to unscrupulously capture survivors and force them to become slaves. In the countryside of England, which was completely unaffected by the nuclear attack, they built a brand new city, a real magic city. Sir, this is the consumption of this week's supplies. If there are no problems, please sign here. A middle-aged woman in her 40s respectfully placed the parchment in her hands on the desk. It was obvious that she was very nervous when facing a girl who was the same age as her daughter. She did not even dare to raise her head and look directly at the other party. Well done. Keep it up. Hermione signed her name expressionlessly at the bottom. She then turned around and glanced at the busy construction site outside the window. With the help of magic, in less than 3 months, an extremely fantastical magic city had risen from the ground. At most, it would be completed in half a year. Relying on the oppression of ordinary people, the quality of life of the wizards in England's magic world did not decrease. Instead, it became better and better. Some of them even restored the manners of medieval nobles. Every time they went out, they would be accompanied by dozens of servants. Of course, these servants were the survivors of the nuclear explosion. Some of them were captured by slave traders and forced to wear magical collars to serve the wizards. Others had to give up their dignity and serve the wizards willingly in order to obtain clean food, water, and medical care. The cruel reality once again proved that in the absence of material goods, the so-called freedom and democracy were just a joke. Thank you for your compliment. I will continue to work hard. The middle-aged woman hurriedly bowed deeply. Before she could turn around and leave, Lucius came up to her with a smug look on his face. He greeted her with a smile. "Good morning, Miss Granger. If you don't mind, can I speak to you in private?" "What is it?" Hermione squinted her eyes warily. She was very clear that the pure-blooded nobles led by the Malfoy family had been inflated recently. They had been colluding with each other in private. There were even rumors that they wanted to elect a king and imitate the medieval feudal system to establish a true magic kingdom. It's about that lord. After all, he has disappeared for so long. We want to confirm his recent situation, and you're the only person who can get in touch with him. Lucius probed meaningfully. Why? It's only been a few months, and you can't wait anymore? Hermione slightly raised the corner of her mouth, revealing a sarcastic smile. No. Please don't misunderstand. We just want to confirm. I believe you should understand that with the increasing population under our control, the entire magic world needs a symbol of cohesion, a leader who can truly lead us to glory, and that lord is the best candidate. We hope that he could be the first king of the Magic Kingdom. That's all. Lucius carefully explained. King. Hermione raised her eyebrows in feigned surprise. If it were in the past, she might have believed this request that sounded very reasonable at first glance. But now, after experiencing countless conspiracies and betrayals, her heart had long become gloomy and dark. Even with her eyes closed, she could feel the other party's uncontrollable ambition. One must know that the Malfoy family relied on betrayal, and betrayal to grow strong. As long as there were enough benefits, there was nothing that they would not dare to do. Just as the two of them looked into each other's eyes and did not say a word to see who would be the first to give up, a violent tremor suddenly came from the ground, producing a loud rumbling sound. Chapter 800. Asterisk boom. 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 Asterisk under the effects of the terrifying power that shook the earth was forcibly torn open, creating a huge bottomless ravine that was over 70 meters wide and several tens of kilometers long. It was as if someone had used a knife to cut open a hole on the surface of the earth. Crimson lava gushed out of the crack like a volcanic eruption. Within a few seconds, everything in the surroundings had been swallowed up. Fortunately, the location of this accidental eruption was not in the city, but rather in a place relatively far away. Otherwise, just this one eruption would have wiped the newly risen Magic City off the map. However, the situation was not much better now. The volcanic ash that fell from the sky would quickly submerge the few farmlands that had not been contaminated by nuclear radiation. Many magi were aware of the severity of the situation and stood up to cast spells, attempting to construct a large magical barrier to keep all the volcanic ash outside. Unfortunately, in the face of nature, humans would always be so insignificant. In addition, the volcanic ash covered a large area, and a mere few hundred magi were unable to play any decisive role. Standing at the top of the tower in the center of the city, Lucius stared dumbfoundedly at the terrible disaster that was happening before him. He could not help but shout, "Damn it! What's going on? Where did that ravine come from?" "Don't ask me. How would I know?" Hermione rolled her eyes in annoyance. Just as she was about to gather more magi to think of a solution, a golden ball of light suddenly extended from the crack and slowly rose. Wherever it passed, all matter and energy underwent incredible changes. For example, the soil that could be seen everywhere turned into various metals in the blink of an eye, and then into dazzling gemstones in the next. Another example was the magical energy that permeated the air. Under the interference of the golden ball of light, it grew at an unbelievable speed. Large numbers of plants began to grow wildly, and in a short while, it formed a large magical forest. Many ordinary animals also underwent different degrees of mutation. This golden ball of light flew higher and higher, and finally stopped about 3,000 to 4,000 meters above the ground, where it was caught by a blurry figure. This figure was none other than Zhang Cheng, who had disappeared for 4 months. Sensing the unparalleled energy contained in the light cluster, his eyes were filled with intense greed and desire. He smiled and mumbled to himself, "Finally, I've finally succeeded in getting you out from the deepest part of the planet's core. The next step is to slowly figure out what you are and whether you can bring me a transcendence of life essence." Just as he finished speaking, the enormous crack on the ground collapsed abruptly. The high-temperature, high-pressure liquid core of the planet that had lost the restraint of the golden cluster of light gushed out like a flood. The iron, nickel, and silicon that were several degrees Celsius instantly killed almost all the creatures on the surface of the planet. More than 90% of the water was vaporized. It was an apocalyptic scene that was 10,000 times more terrifying than a thermonuclear war. What was even more terrifying was that, as the core of the planet gushed out, the magnetic field of the 2 poles was slowly disappearing. The previously beautiful blue planet that was full of vitality had completely turned into a black and red fireball with a surface temperature of more than 1,000 degrees Celsius. It was foreseeable that in the next few decades, or even millions of years, this place would not be able to give birth to any life. There was no doubt that this planet was dead, whether it was on the physical level or on the spiritual level. As for the so-called magic kingdom that had just been established, it had long been swallowed up by the hot liquid core of the planet. In the end, the wizards did not escape the disaster. But Zhang Cheng did not have the slightest emotional fluctuation in this matter. He just glanced at the world that was still collapsing with cold eyes and quickly chose to leave this place that was already worthless. In his eyes, whether it was Hermione Granger, who had intimate behavior with him, or Lucius Malfoy, who had worked closely with him from the beginning, they were all equivalent to tools to achieve his ultimate goal. That was all. This complicated relationship was somewhat similar to that of an owner and a dog. Some people would subconsciously treat dogs as their family or the best partner or friend in their life and invest a lot of emotions in them. But some people would always treat dogs as a tool, just like horses, cows, donkeys, and other domestic animals. They were animals that humans had domesticated to better perform productive labor. There was no need to invest too much emotion in them. Obviously, Zhang Cheng clearly belonged to the latter, because in his inherent concept, those who thought that dogs were the best friends of humans were actually just wishful thinking and self-deceiving. It was not difficult to find that humans had never regarded dogs as their friends if they looked at the breeding records of famous dogs in modern times. Even in order to satisfy the psychology of novelty and aesthetic, people forced dogs to continue inbreeding to obtain a series of pet dogs such as Corgi, Golden Retriever, and completely ignored the terrible hidden dangers and injuries caused by this artificial intervention. Imagine, in order to get a friend that met their aesthetic, would someone force them to endure great pain for generations to carry out inbreeding? Who would force their best friend to be sterilized in order to save trouble? That's right. These were all good things that humans did for their so-called best friends. In fact, the relationship between humans and dogs was never friends, but master and servant, master and tool. It was just that with the development of productivity, in modern times, people gradually got rid of the precarious state and had a sufficient supply of food. So, they gradually evolved from the original pure material pursuit to a higher spiritual level. In this transition, a series of incredible views were produced. Dogs are the best friends of humans was just one of them. Back in front of the tower that twisted space and time, Zhang Cheng carefully placed the golden ball of light in his hand on the top of the tower. At the same time, he set up layer after layer of seals to ensure that it would not come into contact with anything around it. Because the ball of light itself was constantly changing the form of matter and energy around it, he did not dare to carry it around for a long time. Otherwise, God knew what would happen. After doing all this, he breathed a sigh of relief and teleported to the divine dragon's body that had been placed in the open space. Although there was no soul support, this body that contained a lot of divinity was still constantly absorbing energy to strengthen itself. From afar, it looked like a small mountain. In order to surpass everything and stand at the top of life evolution, from today onwards, I will abandon my human identity. Come on, let us completely merge into one. The brain of the mind flayer, the body of the dragon, and the soul of the human with infinite possibilities. With a chilling whisper, Zhang Cheng stretched out his right hand and gently pressed it on the dragon's forehead, injecting the power of creation into it. Come, wonderful bookhouse. Come. Chapter 801. In an ancient castle on the outskirts of Valencia, the old Camila de Silva Velasquez was nearing the end of her life. She was emitting an aura of death from the inside out as she sat on the balcony on the third floor, overlooking the beautiful sunset in the distance. After a full 10 minutes, she asked without turning her head, "Is there still no news of the 14th child of destiny?" "No." "I don't know why, but he suddenly disappeared, just like the previous few times. No one knows where he went, and no one knows when he will return." The man standing in the shadows quickly replied, "Is that so? It seems that I won't be able to wait for him to come find me. What a pity. I thought that I could change my fate, but in the end, it was all a dream." The old woman sighed regretfully. She originally thought that as long as she told that secret to Zhang Cheng would definitely come looking for her. But now, it seemed that the other party was far more difficult to deal with than she had imagined. He was not even a little bit threatened. Fate has always been unpredictable. You should know this better than I do. Also, there are still 3 days before your death date. Maybe he will come looking for you in 3 days? The man comforted her with an emotionless tone. Camilla smiled and shook her head. "No, you don't understand. Fate is indeed unpredictable, but that doesn't mean that it can't be controlled. Do you know? I did a divination for myself some time ago, and the result was that I will get the youth and life that I want, but at the same time, I will lose some precious things." "Oh, as far as I know, your prophecies have come true every time." The man raised his head and revealed an expression of incomparable surprise. "Yes, but because of this, I'm not sure if the last divination will fail." Just as Camilla was trying to move the wheelchair and let the last rays of the sun shine on her face, a huge shadow suddenly fell from the sky and slowly landed on the balcony, slowly transforming into the appearance of a young man. He first looked around, then said with a smile, "The sunset of the Iberian Peninsula is really spectacular, isn't it? Ah, you are finally here. I thought I wouldn't be able to see you before I die." The 14th child of destiny, the legendary embodiment of slaughter, destruction, and annihilation, the slayer of the gods, the terminator and creator of all things, a monster that transcends everything. Camilla stood up from the wheelchair in excitement, her skinny body trembling nonstop. "Sorry, I'm late, but can you explain what this prophecy is all about?" It was clear that the newcomer was none other than Zhang Cheng, who had just merged with the giant dragon's body and the mind flayer's brain. From a certain point of view, he was no longer a human, but a special intelligent life form that had combined the advantages of many powerful creatures. Coupled with the special evolution potion Infinity that was specially made for him, his entire body was emitting a daunting aura. Just by looking at the man hiding in the corner and shivering, one could tell how strong the natural deterrence of carnivores was. However, the emotional Camilla didn't notice this and nodded to herself. "Of course, this is the sacred mission given to me by my family. In fact, this prophecy was left behind by Ancestor Valeni. He ordered his descendants to guard this secret for generations until you appeared." "So, you want me to revive him?" Zhang Cheng probed with a faint smile. "No, of course not. I'm only a messenger. I intend to use the final secret to exchange for a bit of the power of destiny." Camilla slowly knelt down and raised her hands like a devout believer. "What kind of secret?" Zhang Cheng narrowed his eyes and continued to ask. "The keys and locations of 2 seals. One of them is the burial place of Ancestor Valeni." Camilla didn't hesitate and directly revealed her trump card. She was very clear that she didn't have the time or leeway to bargain. If she couldn't obtain enough power of destiny before her aging caught up, then death would come as scheduled. "Sure." Zhang Cheng hesitated for a moment before giving a definite answer. To be precise, he also wanted to know what the so-called power of destiny was and why it could predict the future so accurately. Thank you very much. I swear that you won't regret the choice you made. When the last word left her mouth, Camilla was like a drug addict acting up. She trembled and stuck close to the ground and started to suck along the places Zhang Cheng stepped on. Every time she took a deep breath, her entire body would involuntarily tremble. Her bark-like old face was full of enjoyment. In a short 3 to 5 minutes, this old woman who was over 100 years old suddenly seemed to have a second spring. Not only did she become younger, but a mysterious energy also surrounded her body. Finally, she returned to her charming appearance of around 30 years old. She lightly touched her smooth skin and long black hair and sighed with her eyes narrowed. Youth, life, vitality, this feels so good. Where's my stuff? Zhang Cheng asked straightforwardly as he observed the changes on the man's body with great interest. He didn't know if it was an illusion, but he seemed to feel that something invisible to the naked eye had been sucked away from his body. This thing was most likely the so-called power of destiny. Please wait a moment. Camilla placed one hand on her chest and bowed respectfully. Then, she turned around and went into the room behind the balcony. Not long after, she came out with 2 well-preserved parchment scrolls and 2 crosses inlaid with pearls. These 2 parchment scrolls record the location of the seal. The 2 crosses are the keys to open the seal. You just have to put them into the mold. Great, but I still have a small question. How can I ensure that you will continue to keep this secret? When he said this, Zhang Cheng's eyes flashed with a dangerous light. It was obvious that he wanted to kill her. According to his philosophy, things like oaths and contracts were never reliable. Only the dead, especially the dead whose soul was imprisoned by themselves, could truly keep a secret. Don't worry, the great child of destiny. I have already prepared a perfect hiding place for myself. No one will find it. Moreover, do you think that after knowing the prophecy, I will still have the courage to go against you? No, I've never been a brave person. I won't risk my life. Camilla explained with a sincere expression. Haha, you're very good with words. But just to be safe, I will make a small mark in the depths of your soul. If one day I find out that you have betrayed me, then I will find you and bring you pain, destruction, and death. After saying this, Zhang Cheng raised his right index finger and directly put it through her forehead. He made a special mark in her soul that only he could recognize. Chapter 802. In many people's minds, a key was just a tool used to unlock a lock. It was made of metal and had a serrated shape. However, for a powerful magic seal, the key itself was just a resonance body that acted on the singularity. The material and external form were no longer important. What was important was the information stored inside. After the 2 crosses were stuffed into the molds, within a few minutes, they were stripped of their disguises and revealed their true identities. One of them was a strange sapphire that looked like an eye. When light passed through it, it would emit an incredible brilliance. If it was placed on a smooth wall or ice surface, it would reflect scenes of many mythical creatures such as giants, monsters, elves, and dwarves fighting each other. If he was not mistaken, this thing was the Odin's eye that had been mentioned many times in Norse mythology. It was the price that Odin voluntarily offered to obtain the Spring of Wisdom. Obviously, the corresponding seal of this key was in the distant Scandinavian peninsula in northern Europe. It was covered by dense forests, mountains, and snow all year round. In addition, there was little human activity, so it was a place where secrets could be hidden. However, the map on the parchment was drawn a long time ago. There was neither a standard scale nor an accurate aerial survey. Therefore, in the eyes of modern people, it was basically similar to a painting by the famous Spanish painter Pablo Picasso. Unless he sought the help of a professional, it was impossible to find it. As for the other key, it was a palm-sized stone slab that was densely engraved with cuneiform characters. Judging from the style, it was most likely a product of the early semi-legendary and semi-mythical era of the Mesopotamia. However, it was difficult to determine whether it was Sumerian or Babylonian. The location marked on the map should be in the war-torn Iraq. It was not easy to find it. Just as Zhang Cheng was rubbing his chin and hesitating whether he should first meet the senior Valeni or open the other seal to see how powerful the guards left behind by the gods were, the supreme god suddenly suggested, "Great master, I think before you make a decision, it is best to follow the original plan and give X true intelligence in life. This is more important than anything else." "Oh, why?" Zhang Cheng asked with a frown. "Very simple. You need an assistant who can provide data and analysis reports from an absolutely rational point of view at any time and any place. Of course, I'm not saying that you're not rational enough. Rather, I'm saying that it's the most suitable when it comes to handling details," the paramount heavenly god explained. "What about you? Don't you want a real life?" Zhang Cheng asked with a faint smile. Even though he had used the body and soul of the Black Dragon King's son, Nefarian, to create this powerful artifact, it was still not a living being in the true sense. At best, it was just a magical item with independent thinking ability. However, the paramount heavenly gods clearly didn't care about this. Life? No, I don't want real life. It's too fragile, both externally and internally. Compared to worrying about those boring things, I was very satisfied with my current state. Moreover, if I really become a living being, will you still trust me like you do now? Ha! Unbelievable. As a weapon, your intelligence has far surpassed that of most humans who claim to be the wisest of all things. All right, according to your suggestion, let's first bestow real life to X. I hope this won't take too much time." Zhang Cheng laughed and shook his head. He raised his hand and snapped his fingers lightly. Then he left the Iberian Peninsula and arrived in front of an old 3-story brick house on New York's Staten Island. This was the legacy left behind by Senator Miles before his death. There are large amounts of rare magical metals, materials, and alchemy tools stored inside. It was the best place to attempt to create a mechanical life form. Furthermore, there was no need to worry about being disturbed at all. To be exact, up until now, no one knew that he had returned to New York. Otherwise, his phone would have exploded with calls. Without any hesitation, after entering the basement of the house, the first thing he did was to activate the electronic device and let X copy and download its own data and logic algorithm to the mobile device. Then he tried to build a conversion device that combined magic and technology and input all the content into the pure soul. Although in the world of Harry Potter, most of the human souls that died in the thermonuclear war were swallowed by the golden light, Zhang Cheng still plundered a portion of them. There were only about 60 million souls, which was enough to deal with the current consumption. Soon, after more than 30 failures, the first step, which was also the most important step, was finally completed without any mishaps. "It's time, X, to give yourself a real name." A faint smile appeared on his face as he admired X, who was constantly changing the shape of his soul like a child. A name? Is a name X not good?" The new life undoubtedly still retained a large amount of artificial intelligence thinking. It blinked its eyes in confusion. Zhang Cheng shook his head and explained, "No, of course it's not good. X is just a code name. It represents the unknown and unlimited possibilities. To be exact, it's an expectation for you, not a name. Also, tell me, what kind of requirements do you have for the body? Do you want a male body or a female body?" "Understood. What do you think of the name Adam?" According to the description in the Bible, he was the first human created by God. As for the body and gender, I don't have any special requirements, as long as it can store enough data and perform complex and huge calculations. "Adam? Sounds good. According to this name, it seems that I have to prepare a male body for you." After saying that, Zhang Qing looked at the large amount of materials that he had prepared in advance and began to think about which technology should he use. Was it the exquisite golem craftsmanship of the Faerun continent? Or was it the magic puppet created by the Azeroth continent's high elves and the Burning Legion? Or was it a combination of the two technologies to create a bionic, shape-shifting robot that frequently appeared in sci-fi movies? Most importantly, he had to retain the information collection and processing ability of Adam as a super artificial intelligence. It could quickly hack into various electronic devices, otherwise it would be a failure. In order to do this, he had to either use the mature and mastered cloned brain cells of the mind flayer to build a biological neural computing network, or use modern technology, such as semiconductor chips or quantum technology, to create a true supercomputer. The problem of the former was the extraction and conversion of information between biological nerves and electronic components, and the problem of the latter was the technical and physical aspects. As for the theoretical part, he had already copied a copy from the brain of Iron Man Tony Stark. Chapter 803. For more than half a month, Zhang Cheng had been hiding in the bottomless basement, experimenting with all kinds of possibilities. With the powerful learning ability gained from the fusion of divinity and body, in less than a week, he had learned a lot of scientific knowledge that would take an ordinary person more than 10 years to master. He also used alchemy to try to build a brain that could be used to replace the huge calculation and information processing power of a computer. There were direct constructions and indirect constructions using rare magic materials. Just the waste from the failures alone piled up into a small hill. Fortunately, when the basement was built, he had considered the possibility of creating some large puppets, such as gargoyles, so the area was quite large. Otherwise, just the inadvertent waste would be enough to give him a headache. But after many attempts, he finally used his exquisite magic skills to create a fully enclosed metal sphere with a diameter of more than 10 centimeters. It was important to note that this thing was not purely made with technology or magic, but the combination of the strengths of the two and the use of alchemy. Even the most advanced technology on Earth could not hope to decipher and replicate the extremely complex structure inside. Carefully placing the sphere into the body that was constantly flowing with liquid, Zhang Cheng immediately began to guide the magic energy into the energy center in his chest, the core of Misra. When the energy absorbed by the device reached the minimum activation value, the flowing liquid outside suddenly began to solidify, and the surface of the body was gradually covered with skin and hair. From the outside, he looked no different from a normal person. But in reality, everything that the eye saw was just a disguise created by magic. The solidified liquid was harder and more resilient than any known metal on Earth. It would not melt even in a high temperature of 4,000 degrees Celsius, enough to ensure that the delicate internal structure would not be damaged by external attacks. After another 10 seconds, Adam, who had completely merged his soul with his body, finally opened his eyes and sat up from the experiment table. Looking at his new body, he quickly stood up and knelt on one knee, saying, "Thank you for giving me a body and life, Master." "No, I should be the one thanking you." Zhang Cheng smiled as he admired his masterpiece. "Thanking me?" Adam's face was blank, obviously not understanding the meaning of the sentence just now. "Yes, thank you." Zhang Cheng nodded seriously. "Because in the process of creating you, I looked at magic again from a scientific point of view, and I got a lot of inspiration. Do you know? Actually, in the quantum realm, the difference between magic and technology isn't as big as I thought. On the contrary, there are many similarities between them, such as the relationship between matter and energy. Many times, if you can't find a solution using magic, you could try using technology." "Understood. You've encountered some difficulties, haven't you?" Adam was undoubtedly a professional when it came to technology. He immediately figured out the reason for the so-called gratitude. Zhang Cheng didn't try to hide anything and directly admitted, "Yes. Tell me, what kind of equipment would I need if I want to observe a golden ball of light made of an unknown substance?" "A lot. But the most important thing was definitely the spectrum analyzer. Of course, I'm not referring to an ordinary spectrum analyzer, but a professional large-scale spectrum analyzer." Adam closed his eyes and thought for a moment before quickly giving an answer. "Yes, a spectrum analyzer. What a simple and straightforward solution. As long as light could be seen with the naked eye, it meant that there were a large number of photons or high-energy particles moving in space. The instrument can capture them, and through analysis, I'll be able to know what that thing is." Zhang Cheng's eyes shone with excitement and expectation. "That's the theory, but considering the uniqueness of magic, we might not be able to find the answer from spectrum analysis. At most, We can only rule out some possibilities. No problem. Narrowing down the scope is a good start. I'll give you a mission. Go and purchase the best instrument. I need you to study an interesting advanced life form embryo. Advanced life form embryo? Adam's calm mental state fluctuated, and his pupils flashed with a faint purple light of magic. As a new life that had just obtained a complete soul and the ability to think independently, nothing could arouse his subconscious desire for knowledge more than the research topic of life. It's the golden ball of light I mentioned just now. Trust me, the energy it contains is far beyond your imagination. Zhang Cheng hinted meaningfully. It's my honor, and I seem to feel excitement. Excitement and anticipation. Is this love? Adam raised his hands and muttered to himself. No, not only love, but also desire. Congratulations, from now on, you'll become more and more human, more and more complete, but at the same time, you'll also receive all kinds of troubles. I can't tell you what the meaning of life is, but I can tell you that living is never an easy thing. Now put on your clothes. We still have a lot of work to do. After saying this, Zhang Cheng threw over a suit that originally belonged to Miles, and then stepped out of the dark basement. Just as the two of them arrived at the street one after the other, Faust, who was far away on the other side of the ocean, had already completed the transformation of the goddess corpse. He was laughing wildly at his work, and sometimes he would get close to it with a face full of infatuation. It was obviously a bit abnormal. But those who really knew him knew that although this guy usually pretended to be polite, he was never normal. He even had a serious necrophilia. In his eyes, there was nothing more beautiful than an immortal corpse. On the other side, Laffern, who had been hiding in the holiday villa for a long time, finally finished absorbing the divinity that he obtained not long ago. His body emitted a dazzling silver light, and his every move showed a destructive power. There was no doubt that after working together last time, the power of these two people had made a qualitative leap. But what they didn't know was that Zhang Cheng, who seemed to have obtained nothing, had also surpassed himself and was no longer limited to the identity of a human. No one knew how long the alliance between the three of them would last, and no one knew when they would turn against each other because of benefits. But one thing was certain, whether it was Zhang Cheng, Faust, or Laffern, they were essentially the same kind of people who would do anything to achieve their goals. So as long as there were enough benefits between them, they would continue to cooperate until they stood at the peak of the path of power. Chapter 804. The Scandinavian Mountains were the longest and tallest mountain range in Norway. It stretched from the Barents Sea to the north, the Norwegian Sea to the west, the Skagerrak Strait to the south, and the Baltic Sea coastal plain to the east. It was more than 1,700 kilometers long and between 200 to 600 meters wide. The average elevation was about 1,000 meters above sea level, and it ran through the entire peninsula. It was the birthplace of the Viking pirates that defeated all of Europe, and it was also the starting point of Norse mythology. Because Norway had always been sparsely populated in both history and modern times, and 2/3 of the country's land area was highlands, mountains, and glaciers that were not suitable for human habitation. So there were countless legends and secrets hidden in the depths of the mountains. At this moment, Zhang Cheng was standing at the top of Gar Peak, looking at the white scenery in the distance. He then asked without turning his head, "Are you sure this is one of the 3 marks on the map?" "Yes, sir. Although I'm not sure where you got this ancient parchment map, and I don't know if it's a treasure map left behind by pirates, but this is definitely the first mark." A middle-aged man over 9 meters tall gave an affirmative answer without hesitation. Although he didn't think that he could find anything valuable with a rough and blurry map, he still accepted this guide job that required a certain amount of risk because of the generous reward of 50,000 euros. 50,000 euros could be exchanged for about 500,000 kroner, which was equivalent to an average Norwegian's annual income without eating or drinking. Furthermore, the work would only take a few days, so it was a windfall from the sky. Then what about the other 2 marks? What's their approximate location? Zhang Cheng asked as he picked up the ancient parchment fixed in a glass frame and compared it with a modern map. To be honest, he really couldn't see the slightest similarity between the two. The middle-aged man hesitated for a moment before quickly pointing to the peaks about 3,000 meters away from the north and south. If I'm not wrong, it should be these two places. Look, according to the depiction of the sun on the map, only when the sun sets in the west will the shadows of the three peaks overlap at a certain point below. Triangulation? I see. After glancing at the positions of the other two mountains, Zhangqing quickly revealed an expression of realization. Using the immovable nature of the mountain and the shadows created when the sun rose and set to hide the entrance, it turned out that the seal set by the Norse gods was in such an inconspicuous place. That was right. The purpose of his trip was to find the first seal that had already been broken, and at the same time, pay his respects to the remains of his senior. Damn it, is there really a pirate's treasure buried here? The uncle's eyes were filled with excitement and anticipation. As the birthplace of the earliest pirate culture, Norway, Sweden, and Denmark had many folktales and legends. Occasionally, some ancient precious metal coins and cultural relics would be dug up. They were all the assets left behind by the Viking pirates. Treasures? If you're referring to gold, silver, and jewels, then I can tell you with certainty that they are not. But from a certain point of view, it is indeed a huge treasure. It's just that it's of no use to you. After saying that, Zhang Cheng raised his head and looked at the position of the sun. He sat down on the snow and patiently waited for the constantly changing shadows of the three peaks at the foot of the mountain. Well, it seems like I thought too much. Hearing that was not gold, silver, or jewels, the middle-aged uncle suddenly lost interest in the adventure. He took out the stainless steel wine flask that he always carried with him, twisted the lid, and raised his head to take a big gulp. Although the northern hemisphere had almost officially entered summer, at the peak of more than 2,000 meters above sea level, it still maintained a low temperature of minus 10 degrees Celsius. Drinking hard liquor could provide a great relief. The two sat in the same place for 4.5 hours. The shadows of the three peaks finally merged into a point on a cliff. Through the telescope, they could vaguely see that there was an inconspicuous cave entrance at the overlapping point. But what was interesting was that this place was close to the west, and below it was the endless Norwegian Sea. Under normal circumstances, it was almost impossible for humans to climb up, even with the help of mountaineering tools. When the uncle saw this scene, he subconsciously stood up and exclaimed, "Oh my God! A cave on a cliff. Unbelievable. No one has discovered it for so many years. Seems like my luck is not bad." Zhang Cheng patted the snow on his butt and ran in the direction of the cave without saying anything. But before he ran far, the guide could not help but shout, "Are you crazy? That's a cliff, and you didn't bring any mountaineering tools or safety ropes. If you accidentally slip and fall, you will definitely fall into a meat patty." Zhang Cheng shrugged his shoulders indifferently. "Don't worry, I'm not as weak as you think. Also, thank you for leading the way for me. Our employment relationship ends here. You can go back." After saying this, he ignored the guide and slowly climbed down along the raised shale layer on the side of the cliff. In fact, if there were no outsiders present, he would have used flying or teleporting spells. There was no need to go through so much trouble. But unfortunately, the guide was quite responsible. He stood by the side and watched him climb into the cave. Only then did he carry his bag and turn back. Looking at the back of the guide gradually disappearing, Zhang Cheng could not help but smile and shake his head. He took out the key from his pocket, the Eye of Odin, and carefully walked along the cave. Not long after, he came in front of a giant stalactite that was hundreds of meters tall. He did not know whether it was man-made or formed naturally, but this giant stalactite was not like the bamboo shoots of its kind. Instead, it was like a giant tree that rose up from the ground. Next to the tree was a spring the size of a thumb. Slightly turbid underground water gurgled out continuously. Interesting, if I'm not wrong. This should be the world tree in Norse mythology, and this spring is the legendary fountain of wisdom. According to the description of Odin in the Edda, as long as I put the Eye of Odin in the fountain of wisdom, I will most likely be able to open the sealed entrance. After muttering a few words to himself, Zhang Cheng casually placed Odin's eye above the mouth of the spring. Instantly, the spring seemed to come alive, swallowing the eye of Odin in one gulp. Then, the giant stalactite world tree began to tremble violently for some reason. Finally, a small portal opened at the center of the trunk. Unlike most portals, this portal was more like a mirror or a still lake or well water that occasionally flowed slightly. On the other side of the water, it was not land, but a place with extremely low visibility like the deep sea. Chapter 805. There was no hesitation. Zhang Cheng went straight through the entrance and came to the center of a huge temple. There were huge stone statues more than 10 meters tall around him, and he could even smell the unique stench of seawater. To be precise, this temple was built deep under the sea. Through the faint light provided by the strange crystals embedded in the ceiling, he could see the currents outside, as well as the various fishes in the water. Of course, this was not the most important thing. The most important thing was that in the area in front of the temple that was soaked in seawater, there lay an indescribably huge octopus. It was more than 10 times larger than the king squid he had encountered at the bottom of the sea. Just its thick tentacles alone could easily crush any wooden ship. The giant monster of the North Sea. This name immediately appeared in Zhang Cheng's mind. Obviously, this thing was left behind by the Norse gods to guard the seal. However, in the battle a long time ago, it had perished together with Voleni. But due to some immortal characteristics, the corpse did not decay with the passage of time. Instead, it was perfectly preserved. Not far behind the giant monster of the North Sea lay a human corpse. If he was not wrong, it should be the creator of the demon sword soul catcher, Voleni. He had short gray hair and looked to be in his 50s. He had the typical facial features of a Caucasian. He was not handsome, but he was not ugly either. As for the seal, made of unknown materials, it had long been damaged to the point where it could not be seen. All that was left was a bottomless pit. Out of curiosity about mythical creatures, Zhang Cheng quickly bent down to examine the remains of the giant monster of the North Sea. He quickly discovered that its magical resistance was ridiculous. Regardless of whether it was a powerful elemental spell or a variety of necromancy spells, it could only produce less than 10% of the original spell's effect. Moreover, this fellow had the characteristic of super fast regeneration. No matter how badly it was damaged, it would often recover to its original state in the next 10 seconds to a few minutes. It was a complete nightmare for spellcasters. In addition, the magical energy contained in the blood of the North Sea Siren was far beyond anyone's imagination. It must have had terrifying spell-like abilities when it was alive. He really did not know how Voleni had killed it back then. After examining the sticky and slippery corpse, Zhang Cheng quickly turned his attention to the other corpse. Of course, it was not quite accurate to call it a corpse. After a simple examination, he found that Voleni was not technically dead. It had only entered a long-term state of shock or hibernation. Especially the most important soul of an intelligent life, it had been sealed in a perfect state in a deep sleep. It was not difficult to see that Voleni had suffered terrible injuries after the battle, and he knew that he would not be able to last for long. Should I praise you for your strong desire to live, or should I admire your accurate prediction of the future? But it doesn't matter. Even if I don't resurrect you, I can still obtain a lot of useful information. As he spoke, Zhang Cheng raised his finger that was shining with silver light and gently touched the corpse's forehead. A soul with the same specialty as Warren emerged from his body. He first looked around, then asked in ancient Spanish, "Who are you?" It's the year 2004. As for who I am, I believe you know very well, don't you? Zhang Cheng blinked meaningfully. You are the 14th messenger chosen by the Creator? The year 2004. I've been sleeping for so long. Voleni widened his eyes in shock. What do you think? Now tell me everything you know. In exchange, I can consider letting you come back to life. Zhang Cheng, as usual, offered a condition, trying to use the opponent's weakness to achieve his goal. But unfortunately, Voleni was not easy to deal with. He immediately shook his head with a smile. No, revive me first. Then I'll tell you everything. You might not believe it, but I know you better than you do, including your wisdom, coldness, cruelty, madness, and ambition that even the gods fear and marvel at. Also, don't think about long-term torture or directly invading the soul to get the answer. As long as you do that, I'll choose death to be free. Oh, it seems that your ability to see the future is real. Zhang Cheng raised his eyebrows in surprise. Just as Valeni said, it was just a test. He did not intend to fulfill his promise at all. If Valeni was stupid enough to tell him everything he knew, then what awaited him would be a fate worse than death. This was because Zhang Cheng had never been a kind person. He was extremely wary of everything and had even prepared himself for the worst-case scenario. He would never allow someone who knew his secret to run around. Ha ha. Yes, my ability to foresee the future is much stronger than you think. I can even foresee your future. How about it? Do you want to work together? As natural allies, I don't think it's necessary for us to be hostile to each other. After all, I'm not like you, who have ambition that surpasses everything. In fact, I'm very easy to satisfy, as long as I can live forever as an immortal. Valeni laughed and opened his arms in a welcoming gesture. Zhang Cheng touched his chin and hesitated. But after 2 to 3 minutes, he nodded gently. Okay, but before that, you have to explain what the so-called power of destiny is. And that woman who calls herself the creator, is she really the origin of all life on this planet? A good question. In fact, the so-called destiny is essentially a change and connection between time and space. You can understand it as the possibility of all matter, including life, in an area at a certain point in time. Valeni explained with a slight smile. Possibility? Yes, possibility. Let me give you an example. Just like the two of us standing here now. How many possibilities do you think will happen? A playful expression appeared on Valeni's face as he said this. The answer is 145,000. Hundreds of them will be you killing me, and dozens of them will be me killing you, or the giant monster of the North Sea will suddenly revive and kill us both. Don't think that this is a joke. The so-called possibility is that no matter how probable it is, it will be included in the calculation. But among these countless possibilities, only one or a few will happen in the next phase of the flow of time. The rest will all disappear. And my power of destiny can foresee these and try to intervene and change them. My friend, the future is never set in stone. My ability is to monitor its development all the time. Come, wonderful book house. Come. Chapter 806. Unbelievable. No wonder you can accurately predict what will happen in the future. In that case, I have no reason to resurrect you, right? Zhang Cheng's eyes flashed with a dangerous light. Obviously, according to the explanation just now, the so-called power of destiny could be summed up in one word: omniscience. It was not as simple as simply peeking into the future. It was a nightmare to keep someone who could predict what you would do in the next moment by your side. Valeni undoubtedly sensed the undisguised killing intent and shook his head with a smile. No, my friend, I'm not as omniscient as you think. In fact, this ability puts a considerable burden on me, so much so that I have to weaken it in some way, or else it will not take long for me to go completely crazy. And only when I focus my attention on a certain point in time can I accurately predict all the possibilities that will happen next. It doesn't mean that I will always passively receive the information. At the same time, the longer the time span, the less information I can receive, and the lower the success rate of my prediction. You don't have to be so wary of me. I am no longer a threat to you in terms of power. Most importantly, as long as you resurrect me, I will tell you another way to use the power you have awakened. Another way to use it? Zhang Cheng's face showed an expression of interest, but he did not believe a single word that Valeni said. As the saying goes, trust is a virtue, but doubt can protect you from the risk of being betrayed. He didn't think that lying and deceiving were difficult for a person who longed to live again. On the contrary, most people would not hesitate to dig out their conscience and feed it to the dogs in order to survive, not to mention telling a few lies. That's right. Another way to use it. Valeni raised 2 fingers. As everyone knows, everything has a duality. They are like a pair of twins that will never be separated. One will always accompany the other. For example, good and evil, order and chaos, life and death. The same principle applies to creation and destruction. Think about it. When you use your power to create everything to destroy something, what kind of spectacular scene will the result be? Believe me, you have not discovered your true potential. You seem to know a lot of secrets, don't you? Zhang Cheng stared at Valeni thoughtfully. Ah, yes, I know many secrets, including how emissaries like you and me were born. Do you know? The extraordinary power we've shown isn't actually a gift from the woman who claims to be the creator, but something else that's more interesting and closer to the essence, Valeni explained meaningfully. One last question. Do you know who the woman who calls herself the creator is? If all the seals are opened, how will she deal with us so-called messengers and children? There is no doubt that the reason Zhang Cheng raised such a sharp question was mainly to test the attitude and position of this guy in front of him. After all, Valeni's abilities and actions were too mysterious. First of all, he was the first emissary to break the seal. Similarly, he was also the only one who chose to marry and reproduce. It should be noted that humans, after suddenly changing to a completely unfamiliar environment, would often have a strong sense of uneasiness. Coupled with the fact that they had to face the pressure of survival, it was almost impossible for them to choose to reproduce as a consideration. The reason was simple. They didn't have the ability to ensure the safety of themselves and their descendants, and they didn't want to expose their weaknesses to the enemy. Secondly, as a person who could foresee the future and his own death, why didn't he choose to escape? Why did he sacrifice himself in exchange for the first seal to be broken? Could it be that he was really loyal to the Creator? Or was there a hidden secret behind this? Finally, and most importantly, was that strange prophecy true or false? With countless doubts, Zhang Cheng felt that he should give Valeni a chance to prove that he was worthy of being resurrected. Valeni seemed to understand this as well. He put away all the expressions and actions that might cause unnecessary misunderstandings and answered solemnly. In general, most of what the Creator gave is true. She did indeed create the gods and most of the life on this planet. She only hid one thing. Oh, which one? Of course, it's about her being the first to awaken consciousness on Earth. According to my investigation, she is actually just like you and me, an out-and-out outsider. The only difference is that she awakened much earlier than us and had hundreds of millions of years to train her abilities. So instead of saying that she is our mother, it's better to say that she is our elder sister. We were not created by her, but were summoned by another power. Elder sister? 100-million-year-old elder sister? Zhang Cheng raised his eyebrows and showed a half-smile. Why is it strange? Don't forget, if you and I also had hundreds of millions of years to develop our own potential, would we be worse than her? Valeni asked with a sneer. Zhang Cheng frowned and pondered for a moment. He immediately shook his head and said, "No, that's not what I meant. What I meant was, if she's also an outsider like us, how do you explain the origin of our power, which is far beyond the understanding of ordinary people and does not even belong to the ordinary sense of magic, comes from?" Good question. In fact, as early as when the power had just awakened, I did a very in-depth investigation, trying to find the answer hidden behind the confusing clues. Unfortunately, the era she was born in is too far away, so far away that I can't even touch on it. But the interesting thing is, apart from her, I also found something that is almost comparable to the time she has existed. Take a guess, what is this thing? While saying this, Valeni's eyes flashed with an unusual light, and no one knew what he was thinking. Please don't beat around the bush. Give me the answer directly. Zhang Cheng impatiently urged. Valeni smiled and shrugged. Okay, the answer is that parchment scroll. How is it? Are you surprised? According to what she said, this parchment scroll was a magic tool created to summon us and maintain contact with us. Then why is it as old as her? This is somewhat contradictory when she mentioned that she was betrayed by the gods and began to prepare for revenge. My guess is that the parchment scroll is the root of all these inconceivable things. It summoned the Creator, and after the Creator was sealed, it summoned us. Parchment scroll. Zhang Chang suddenly seemed to understand something. He quickly took out the parchment scroll that he carried with him and stood still. Chapter 807. It was 20 centimeters long, 10 centimeters wide, and about 0.5 millimeters thick. The edges looked slightly yellowed due to the baptism of time, and the texture was very soft. There was nothing special about it, and there were no signs of magical energy fluctuations. To be honest, this was the first time Zhang Cheng had seriously observed this little thing that followed him to the magical earth. When he first woke up, there was not even a piece of cloth to cover the important parts of his body except for this parchment scroll. Unremarkable. That's right. It was unremarkable. Zhang Cheng even ignored the existence of this little piece of paper for a long time. But now a guy suddenly told him that this thing was actually as old as the creator, or even much older than the woman who claimed to be the creator. It was a little hard to accept. Don't doubt it. Observe carefully. Don't you think its existence itself is a miracle? There is no energy, and there is nothing special about it, but can transmit information across time and space. And I don't know if you've tried, but no method can destroy this fragile piece of paper. To be exact, every time it is destroyed, it will be restored to its original state in just a few seconds. In order to gain trust, Valeni threw out another piece of important information. Needless to say, he must have done something similar when he had the parchment scroll before. This kind of information that could be verified with a little movement of the fingers obviously could not be a lie, at least not from the mouth of a smart person. So Zhang Chang believed it without even trying. And at the same time, he did not forget to continue asking, "How much do you know about this parchment scroll?" "Not much. I only know that, including the creator, all the people chosen by the scroll can transmit information and even transmit items and power through it within a certain range. But there is one thing to note, and that is it will only recognize one person as its master for a certain period of time. Close your eyes, put your consciousness into it, and soon you will find some very interesting phenomena." After saying that, Valeni stretched out his right hand and made a gesture of invitation, with a trace of undisguised playfulness in his eyes. Consciousness? When Zhang Cheng heard this word, alarm bells rang in his heart. Consciousness, especially subjective consciousness, was a part of the soul, to some extent, or an extension of one's perception. If one's subjective consciousness was violently attacked, although it would not leave irreparable damage, one would be in a weakened state for a long time. In serious cases, one might even fall into a deep sleep for several years or even decades. Relax. I'm still waiting for you to revive. Why would I play any tricks now? Valeni blinked innocently. Is that so? Zhang Cheng smiled non-committally as he began to carefully insert a part of his consciousness into the parchment scroll. In an instant, for some reason, golden lines suddenly appeared on the parchment, and these lines quickly formed a complicated pattern that looked like a mark. Not long after, the 15 glaring light spots on the scroll were all lit up. 13 of them were relatively dim, but the first and the last one were exceptionally bright, so bright that it was difficult to open one's eyes. "What is this?" Zhang Cheng asked with a frown. Valeni replied without hesitation, "I don't know. I personally think that these light spots should represent us. The first one is the woman who calls herself the creator. She obviously knows more about the scroll than anyone else, and the last one is you, the current owner of the scroll. In fact, this piece of paper hides more secrets than you think, but the way it stores the information is so complicated that you and I can't understand the meaning behind it. But our sister is different. She has enough time to slowly decipher the mysteries. Perhaps this is the reason why she is so powerful. So, you have your own plans and you don't really want to side with her?" Zhang Cheng sensed the hint in Valeni's words, and the corners of his mouth curled up slightly. "Side with her? No, I'm not stupid enough to do that. I'm the same as you. I only live for myself, for the sake of unraveling the huge secrets behind it. As mentioned before, we are natural allies, not enemies." Valeni emphasized the relationship between the two once again. However, this reason was obviously not enough to convince the suspicious Zhang Cheng. He narrowed his eyes and thought for a few seconds, and immediately asked, "I don't understand. Since you live for yourself, why did you still open the seal when you knew that the outcome would be death? Wouldn't it be better to keep her sealed forever?" "Ha ha, you think I had a choice?" Valeni couldn't help but laugh. "No, I didn't have a choice at all, because I foresaw the future. I foresaw all the possibilities. Guess what the outcome would be? Among the tens of millions of possibilities, every single one of them led to death. And I chose the only one that could bring me back from the dead. All the possibilities led to death." Zhang Cheng raised his eyebrows in surprise. "Yes, you can understand it as walking into the dead end of fate. After all, in terms of strength, I'm not as strong as you. Even if I face danger head-on, I can easily crush the enemy. Generally speaking, I try to avoid risks as much as possible, carefully do all the preparations, and avoid powerful enemies as much as possible. You might not believe it, but in the decades of my life, I've never engaged in a real battle. Instead, I've used others, various poisons, traps, and magic tools to achieve my goals." Valeni explained helplessly. "I see. Looks like you're a rare smart person. Then, smart person, let's talk about the conditions." As he spoke, Zhang Cheng took out a small bottle of blood from Camilla de Silva Velasquez. "Conditions? Didn't we just talk about it? You resurrect me, and I'll tell you all the secrets I know." Valeni asked with a face full of questions. Zhang Cheng chuckled and shook his head. "No, that's only your condition. I didn't agree to it. What else do you want from me? I want you to leave the human world and go to hell to take charge of a great conquest plan. No matter what, your ability is a little worrying, so I have to make sure that you're always within my surveillance range. How about it? This condition isn't too difficult to accept, right? Conquer hell." Valeni's pupils suddenly shrank. "Yes, conquer hell. I believe that with your ability and my demon army, it shouldn't be too difficult to conquer hell and then heaven." Although Zhang Cheng used a negotiating tone, the cold light in his eyes didn't seem to be negotiating at all. Instead, it was a strong warning. Either agree to live or refuse to die. Chapter 808. The Barren Land, the easternmost barren land of the entire infernal world, near the poisonous swamp, was full of deserts and a harsh and cruel ecological environment. Even for demons with strong adaptability, it was full of danger. Even staying in the wild for 10 to 20 minutes could mean being attacked by predators, dragged into a dark corner, and eaten. After all, Infernal World was not a peaceful and stable place. Apart from demons, there were many powerful and terrifying monsters. Some particularly powerful individuals were even comparable to the demon kings who stood at the top of power. In particular, the Barren Land was originally at the junction of civilization and wilderness. So despite its large area, the number of demons was very small. It was not known if there were 3 million demons in total. There is only one decent city, which was known as the City of the Giant Crocodile, Vera. It was said that the city was built by Leviathan, the demon king who ruled the poisonous swamp, but later died in the ancient war. So the rulers had been changing constantly, but one thing had never changed. The master of the city was 100% the most powerful demon lord in the entire Barren Land. In fact, as early as 300 years ago, a swamp half-demon with the appearance of a snake creature successfully conquered the city of Vera with unparalleled power and forced all the surrounding lords to pay tribute to him, becoming the supreme king of the Barren Land. But today, 300 years later, the body of this unlucky guy had been hung in front of the palace in the center of the city as an ornament to show the power of the new master. This new ruler was none other than the female demon lord, Nissa, who had led the army for several months and finally unified the Barren Land. At the moment, she was sitting on a chair piled up with skeletons, looking down at the neatly arranged army outside the window with undisguised pride on her face. That was because compared to the first expedition where there were only 2 or 3 of them, the current army had grown to more than 200,000 men. Almost all the defeated demon lords had been transformed into pure killing machines by the dark powers and no longer had the ability to think independently. Perhaps in the eyes of many people, this was a huge flaw. After all, without the ability to think, it meant that there was no subjective judgment and only rigid implementation of orders given by the higher-ups. But in hell, where betrayal was more frequent than eating and drinking, not having the ability to think was actually a good thing. At the very least, there wouldn't be subordinates who would deliberately do something in the dark in order to achieve their own ambitions, which would ultimately lead to the death of their lord. Of course, in order to satisfy her vanity and need to rule, Nissa still kept some good-looking high-level demons as her subordinates. As she enjoyed the servant's careful massage, she suddenly opened her mouth and asked the subordinate standing beside her, "Brock, recently, my neighbors haven't acted rashly, right?" "No, the supreme queen of the barren land. In front of your powerful strength, all the surrounding lords are hiding in their castles and trembling. It's already a fortunate thing that you didn't come knocking on their door. How would you dare to seek your own death?" A tall male demon took the initiative to step forward and bowed deeply at the waist. "That's right. Your army does not fear death. They are invincible." Another bootlicker hurriedly stood up and echoed loudly. Things like moral integrity completely did not exist for demons. As long as they could please their superiors and gain their trust, they could spout all kinds of flattery from their mouths while cursing the other party to die in their hearts so that they could have a chance to climb up. Nissa was undoubtedly very clear about this. So from the beginning to the end, she had not handed over the command of the army to anyone, even if commanding such a huge army was already a little difficult. After all, she was not the kind of lord who climbed up little by little with her own strength, but a freak forcibly born by external forces. She alone was not enough to suppress the ambitious people in this huge and barren land. If she lost absolute control of the army, she would not be far from death. According to the statistics of the intelligence dealers, more than 60% of the lords who died in hell had been betrayed by their subordinates. Among these 60%, nearly two-thirds had failed to control the army under their command. As a smart and cautious female demon, Nissa did not want to repeat the mistakes of her predecessors. Just as she was about to continue speaking, a silver-gray amulet hanging around her neck began to glow for some reason. Then, it floated up and formed a stable teleportation channel in midair. The next second, two humans appeared in the center of the incomparably luxurious palace. One of them was none other than Zhang Chung himself, and the other was Valeni, who had just been resurrected not long ago. It had to be said that their sudden appearance stunned all the demons in the palace. This was because in the eyes of most demons, humans were weak creatures whose only value was to die quickly and provide them with an endless supply of high-quality souls. But now, two people who did not know what was good for them had actually barged into hell, into the home of the demons. This was simply a naked provocation and humiliation. Finally, the first high-level demon reacted and suddenly spread his wings to charge forward, trying to drag the two seemingly weak humans to the ground and torture them. But before he could get close, Zhang Chung opened his 5 fingers and made a squeezing motion. Bang! There was no surprise. This poor idiot suddenly seemed to have been squeezed by a terrifying external force and immediately exploded. Blood, minced meat, and broken bones splattered in all directions like raindrops falling from the sky. Immediately, the rest of the demons who were ready to make a move were so frightened that they did not dare to move. "Oomph. A bunch of trash." Zhang Chung mercilessly expressed his disdain for these demons. Just as he said, these high-level demons were still alive mainly because their strength was too weak and did not have the qualifications to be transformed. Those who had the qualifications had long become battle puppets without thoughts. Seeing this scene, Nissa immediately frowned and protested. "Please pay attention to your attitude. This is my place. You should at least maintain the most basic respect for me." "Respect? Hee hee. You seem to have forgotten your position and who gave you the command of the army, haven't you?" As he spoke, Zhang Chung walked step by step to the seat piled up with skeletons and grabbed the female demon like a chick. Although Nissa had been trying to give orders to the demon guards who had been transformed by dark powers, unfortunately, the originally 100% obedient demon guards did not even have a slightest reaction and completely ignored her orders. At this moment, the slightly arrogant Nissa finally realized that the powerful army outside did not belong to her, and she had only obtained the command. Chapter 809. Hell, from a moment of its birth, was a place that advocated the law of the jungle where the strong preyed on the weak. There was neither public opinion nor moral restraint like human society, nor was there any hypocritical kindness. There was only an infinite desire for power and the most primitive instinct of life, selfishness. Yes, in order to ensure that they could live better and obtain more resources, selfishness was the most primitive and basic form of life. As for the ethical and moral system that human society developed later, it was to maintain the stability of society and to allow more people to gather together to engage in production, labor, and creation. It was an out-and-out anti-biological instinct. Therefore, for a very long time, the history of human development was a struggle between instincts and counter-instincts. Even after entering a fully anti-violence modern society, this struggle still existed and would continue for a long time with the development of science and technology. But interestingly, the demons of hell did not form a self-restraining system like ethics and morality in the process of constantly gathering together like humans. On the contrary, they magnified the most instinctive side of creatures, extending greed, jealousy, lust, selfishness, arrogance, rage, laziness, and other emotions infinitely, creating a civilization system that was completely different from humans. And in this system, the only thing that had binding force was power and authority. In hell, the strong had innate rights. Even if they did not have a demon bloodline, the demons would still submit to powerful strength, even though this submission was for the sake of being able to replace them one day. But it was undeniable that it was also this point that gave Zhang Cheng the foundation for his conquest plan. Otherwise, if all the demons united to resist the invasion of foreign enemies, then he would never have the whimsical idea of conquering hell, because the investment and return were not proportional at all. Moreover, what was the use of having a hell that did not even have demons? Half an hour later, in the huge palace in the center of Vera City, Zhang Cheng sat on a throne piled up with countless skulls like a king, looking at the thousands of high-level demons kneeling on the ground. He had a playful expression on his face. How is it? In the future war, who do you think is trustworthy and who will choose to betray you? Trust? Are you kidding? These guys were demons. 1 second, they can still talk to you, and the next second, they can dig out your heart, extract your soul, and burn it in the fire for 100 years just to hear your screams of pain and despair. Volany spread out his hands exaggeratedly. As a person who had just come back from the dead, he didn't seem to be uncomfortable at all. Instead, he was filled with a dark sense of humor. Even after returning to modern society, the first thing this old man did was to enter a nightclub and chat with those sexy and scantily clad beauties. In the end, he even had a fierce field battle in a dark alley. I think you should be able to tell what is mental activity and what is practical action. Pick the latter out for me, or else. At this point, Zhang Cheng deliberately paused, his eyes revealing a blatant warning. When Warrant noticed this, he sighed helplessly. All right, you have the final say. He took out 2 simple and crude gold coins from his pocket and tossed them into the air. In an instant, the 2 gold coins seemed to come alive as they flew over the heads of thousands of high-level demons, and then left a black and white light on their heads. In just a few seconds, all the demons in the entire palace were given one of the colors. Just as they were wondering what the use of this thing was, Zhang Cheng, who had been sitting on the chair all this time, suddenly raised the godly weapon, the supreme authority. In the next second, bang, 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 bang. All the unlucky demons with the black light on their heads exploded on the spot. They didn't even have the chance to scream before they were turned into blood and flesh of different sizes. 2/3 of the demons in the palace disappeared, replaced by the pungent smell of blood in the air. As for those fellows who were lucky enough to escape, they all lowered their heads in unison, their bodies trembling slightly. It was obvious that they were greatly frightened by this extreme cruelty and brutality. They still couldn't believe that a human could have a purer evil than demons. After doing all this, Zhang Cheng kicked away Nissa, who was licking his boots like a bitch on the ground. He stood up and said to the rest of the demons, "You know what? I originally planned to clean up all of you useless trash, but considering that ruling is a more troublesome matter, I've decided to give you all another chance, a chance to prove yourselves." How do we prove ourselves? A female demon with pale yellow pupils raised her head and asked carefully. Although she felt very uncomfortable being stained with the flesh and blood of her own kind, she didn't dare to move and still maintained the most humble posture. It's very simple. Drink the demon blood, abandon the past, and become a member of the army. Zhang Cheng raised the supreme authority again and gently knocked on the ground. In the blink of an eye, a circular well with a diameter of more than 2 meters and a depth of half a meter rose from the ground. It was filled with the blood of the abyssal lords that contained powerful energy. This blood was different from the diluted blood that the Draenor orcs had drunk. It was the purest blood of the abyssal lords without any buffer agent. Its violent characteristics were enough to tear apart the bodies of most creatures in just a few seconds. Obviously, these poor fellows had once again become test subjects, used to test the maximum capacity of the demon race's body. If they could withstand the most violent blood of the abyssal lords, it meant that they had very high growth potential and could play a pivotal role in the future war. If they couldn't, it proved that they weren't worth wasting too much time and energy on. They just had to play the role of cannon fodder. Demon blood. The female demon felt the terrifying evil energy emanating from the well and instinctively crawled closer, staring at the dazzling green liquid. That's right. What are you waiting for? Drink it. As long as you can withstand this violence, you can obtain unimaginable power from it. Zhang Cheng urged impatiently. But what if I can't bear it? The female demon's voice trembled. Then you will die. Your body and soul will be torn apart by the evil energy. Devour. Remember, trash has no value in my eyes. With that, Zhang Cheng picked up a wine cup made of the skull of an unknown creature on the table, scooped a cup full of water, and handed it to the demon. Chapter 8:10. There was no doubt that the demoness knew that she only had two choices. One was to drink this dangerous demonic blood and see if her potential could withstand such violent energy, and the other was to be killed. The latter was almost suicidal and obviously could not be accepted by the selfish demons, so drinking the demonic blood was the only way to survive. After figuring this out, she didn't say anything else. She lifted the skull and drank the viscous liquid that was emitting a green fluorescent light in one gulp. Instantly, an indescribable surge of energy tore through her chest, and her heart seemed to be stimulated by something as it beat at least 10 times per second. And with every beat, it became harder and harder, and finally, the relatively soft and resilient heart muscle turned into an unknown substance as hard as stone. At the same time, her blood gradually changed from the original dark red to green, which symbolized dark energy. Not only her heart and blood, but to be precise, the demoness' entire body was undergoing a drastic change. No one knew whether the next second would be a terrible collapse or an evolution of life essence. The only thing they knew was that the process was extremely painful, and even the screams were very weak. About 2 or 3 minutes later, her body seemed to have reached some kind of limit and finally exploded with a bang. Just the splashing green liquid alone dissolved everything it came into contact with. At least 6 unlucky demons died on the spot, and several quickly cut off part of their bodies to successfully avoid following in the footsteps of the former. What a pity. Looks like you are a worthless piece of trash. Zhang Cheng commented in a cold tone, and then glanced at the remaining demons. Who's next? Silence. No one in the palace dared to make even the slightest sound. Even Voleni, who had a relatively equal status, did not intend to show his sense of humor at this time, because from his pair of black hole-like eyes, even the dullest fool could feel the danger. But silence did not mean that they could escape. In just a few minutes, screams and wails from the palace could be heard throughout the city. Some biologists once said that the evolution of life was an extremely cruel process. Almost every step forward was accompanied by the extinction of a large number of species as the price. In fact, if one forcefully destroyed the stability of the genes of a certain species and caused it to evolve to a higher level, there was a 100% chance that this species would suffer a devastating blow. In the end, it would be a miracle if there was 1% or even 1 in 1,000 lucky ones that survived. After 3 hours of struggling on the brink of death, less than 60 of the thousands of high-level demons survived and were transformed by the blood of the Lord of the Abyss. Their bodies were filled with powerful dark energy from another universe. As for the rest, they had long since merged into the thick, viscous mixture of flesh and blood on the ground. Zhang Cheng used practical actions to finally let these demons who thought they were the source of all evil understand what true cold-bloodedness and cruelty were. Looking at the demons kneeling on the ground and not daring to move, Volini suddenly asked, "Don't tell me your so-called plan to conquer hell is to rely on these few modified demons to complete it? What? You can predict the future, but you still don't know what I'm going to do next?" Zhang Cheng asked meaningfully. "Damn it. I said that the power of fate can only accurately predict all possibilities when I focus on a certain point in time. And in order not to be killed by you, I've already set a rule for myself. I will never predict what you're going to do next without your permission." Volini shrugged innocently. "Is that so? Do you think I'll believe you?" Zhang Cheng was completely unmoved. To be precise, although the relationship between the two could be called the closest of allies, he had always regarded Volini as one of the most dangerous potential enemies, even far above those sleeping gods. "It's your business whether you believe me or not. Anyway, I'll do it according to the rules I set. After all, you're an extremely dangerous guy. I don't want to be caught one day and then die in your hands." Having said that, Volini took out a rolled cigarette from his pocket, lit it, and took a deep breath. Soon, he began to laugh happily. Due to the lack of the corresponding information, it was almost impossible to determine whether his current hedonistic style was natural or a deliberate disguise. Zhang Cheng did not dwell on this question for too long. He directly took out the modified demonic commanding codex, closed his eyes, and communicated with the thousands of Burning Legion's demon souls, especially the high-ranking commanders with outstanding military achievements such as Erida, Dreadlord, Lord of the Abyss, and Sylvanus. When he opened his eyes again, he immediately chanted loudly in the ancient demonic language, "Resurrect, powerful beings from the end of another universe. You were born at the edge of order and distorted time and space. You are born destroyers and destroyers. Your name is the Burning Legion. Today, I will lead you to conquer this world." As the last word escaped his mouth, the demonic commanding codex suddenly opened a huge black hole out of thin air. Millions of demon souls of various shapes and sizes flew out from within. They were like a group of hungry beasts, constantly circling above the huge palace as if waiting for something important. Obviously, these guys needed souls and a huge number of souls to reconstruct their bodies and complete the most important step of resurrection. Zhang Cheng, who was already prepared, did not say anything. He directly opened his magic pouch and poured out tens of millions of soul fragments, allowing the Burning Legion's demon souls to fight and even kill each other. In just 5 minutes, the first Lord of the Abyss had grabbed enough fragments, and its huge body gradually began to materialize. The moment the green, evil energy fire above its head was ignited, it stomped the ground and roared with anger and wildness. "Ah, the great Brotavius is back. Tremble, enemy of the Legion. I will crush you." But before it could raise the huge weapon in its hand to do anything, it heard an extremely cold voice echoing in its ears. "Idiot! Shut your smelly mouth. Then kneel in front of me." Plop! The Lord of the Abyss's thick knees were completely out of its control. It directly bent down and knelt on the ground, unable to move at all. It could not even raise its head to look ahead. With the first example, the resurrected demons of the Burning Legion also knelt on one knee, patiently waiting for their new master's orders. M. Chapter 811. What was the most important thing for an army? Some people felt that it was quantity. After all, the more people there were, the greater the strength. Sometimes, scale would bring about an unimaginable strategic advantage. Some people also thought that it was weapons and equipment. The reason was that a group of people with wooden sticks could not defeat opponents with sharp swords. However, those who knew a little about military affairs knew that although these 2 points made sense, they were not the decisive factor. The real factor that determined whether an army was strong or not was the middle and lower officers who were responsible for transmitting the orders of the highest commander to the soldiers. As long as they were not scattered, then no matter how great the damage was, the army could recover in a very short time. Soldiers, to put it bluntly, were a kind of resource, a kind of renewable consumable. If the army was compared to a human, then the soldiers were the skin and muscles. The middle and lower officers were the bones and nerve conduction system. The logistics were the blood, the upper officers were the brain, and the scouts were the eyes and ears. Generally speaking, if the skin and muscles were damaged, as long as it was not too serious, the human body would be able to recover with its self-healing ability. However, if there were problems with the bones and nerve conduction system, then even if this person was lucky enough to survive, he would become a complete cripple. As for the most important brain, once it was destroyed, the entire army would be finished. Even if they were all wiped out by the enemy, it would not be a big deal. Although strictly speaking, Zhang Cheng was not a qualified army commander, he understood the importance of organizational structure and system. Thus, he chose the Burning Legion, which had conquered and destroyed countless worlds, to start a war that would engulf the entire hell and heaven. After all, not only were they powerful, but they were also very experienced. Even the lowest soldier had participated in at least 10 large-scale battles. Of course, the only drawback was that these fellows were a little unruly, especially the dreadlords who liked to act one way and act another. Who knew when they would join forces to start a rebellion? After all, Zhang Cheng was not Sargeras, who had unparalleled power. Even the 2 deputies of the army, Killed Jaden the Deceiver and Archimon the Polluter, could not challenge the absolute rule of the Dark Titan. Fortunately, he now had another power that could restrict them, and that was Valeni. He believed that this old man would be conscientious in monitoring the Dreadlord's private actions, even if it was for him. Otherwise, if there was a rebellion, he would be the first to die. After consuming more than 40 million souls, the entire million demons of the Burning Legion finally occupied Vela City and began to methodically build war machines with limited resources. At the same time, they did not forget to send out squads of 10,000 to launch probing attacks on the surrounding areas. In a short span of a week or so, those territories with insufficient strength fell one after another. At the same time, a large number of captives were taken in as servants and cannon fodder to launch a new round of attacks. Under the strategic guidance of the Burning Legion's many years of using battle to nurture battle and disintegrate the enemy from within, the Burning Legion rapidly developed and expanded in the form of a rolling snowball. The Abyssal Lord and Irida were in charge of the frontal assault, while the Dreadlord Nazresm used his innate camouflage ability to sneak into the enemy's ranks to create chaos and suspicion. It didn't take long for them to conquer another important city to the west, Claydescamph. Its fall meant that the easternmost region of Hell had completely fallen under the control of the army. Since then, this land of more than 10,000 square kilometers and the tens of millions of demons living on it had become the capital used to launch the next phase of the attack. But before that, they still had to stop and do some minor adjustments, especially integrating resources, expanding the number of the army, and transforming more demons into mindless killing machines. Standing on the top floor of the steeple-shaped palace in Claydescamph, Zhang Cheng stood in front of the window and admired the scene of slaves building all kinds of weapons in full swing. He asked without turning his head, "What do you think my chances of winning the next battle are?" "Not more than 40%. You have to understand that our opponents have already sensed the threat and secretly formed a huge alliance. What you have to deal with next is not a scattered army, but a truly organized army of hell. Valeni gave his prediction directly. 40%? Are those selfish demon lords that powerful? Zhang Cheng turned around, his tone revealing a strong sense of doubt. Valeni shook his head and explained, "No, you're suppressing them too much, causing them to develop a strong sense of crisis, so they temporarily gave up on their grudges. I promise that if you can restrain yourself a little, it won't be long before this alliance disintegrates from the inside. In addition, you'd better be careful from now on. I can guarantee that those high and mighty demon kings will definitely notice the movements here." Demon kings? Since the ancient war, is there anyone in hell who is worthy of being called a demon king? Zhang Cheng smiled disdainfully. Don't underestimate hell. Don't underestimate the demons born from this land. They are much more dangerous than you think. Valeni warned with a serious expression. Zhang Cheng raised a finger and shook it gently. No, you don't understand what I want to express. I never said that the demons of hell are not dangerous. I'm referring to the thousands of years of peace that made heaven, hell, and the human world become incomparably dull. They forgot that peace is always short-lived in order to welcome the arrival of the next, more brutal war. What's more, this can't be considered a real peace at all. It's just a truce agreement. As long as you create a little friction and hatred, you can easily reignite the flames of war. Damn it, don't tell me you wanna... Valeni's eyes widened with a horrified expression. That's right. If our actions have already attracted the attention of the upper echelons of hell, then why don't we expand the scope of the war and pull in the self-proclaimed good and righteous angels of heaven? I'm sure they won't mind taking this opportunity to deal a heavy blow to the chaotic hell. I'm very curious, if a war breaks out between heaven and hell, will those so-called demon kings still have the energy to pay attention to us? After saying this, Zhang Cheng raised the corner of his mouth and revealed an extremely sinister cold smile. The enemy of my enemy is my friend. This sentence will never go out of style. Moreover, he still had a trump card in his hand that he hadn't revealed yet, and that was the tens of thousands of giant dragons. These little guys that grew very quickly had already grown to a point where they were terrifying. Once they joined the war, they would definitely cause an indelible psychological trauma to the enemy. Understood. I'll go inform the feared demon kings and create some trouble at the border between hell and heaven. Valeni placed one hand on his chest and bowed slightly, then turned and disappeared at the end of the dark corridor. Less than a minute after he left, Succubus Ren dispelled her invisible state and hugged Zhang Cheng's neck from behind. She asked in a seductive voice, "Great evil master, are you sure this guy is trustworthy? Come, wonderful bookhouse. Come." Chapter 812. Trust? What gave you the illusion that I trust him? Zhang Cheng shook his head with a meaningful smile. No, the word trust has long been removed from my dictionary. In my opinion, there are only 3 types of subordinates or allies, including you. The first type is those who have betrayed, the second type is those who are planning to betray, and the third type is those who have no intention of betraying at the moment, but will choose to betray at a certain time in the future. Trust and loyalty don't exist from the beginning. Only a fool would believe that an intelligent creature with independent thinking would be willing to sacrifice everything for another intelligent creature. In fact, all actions that are seen as loyal often have many little secrets behind them. I never trust anyone, nor do I have any expectations of loyalty, because that is something only a fool would do. A truly intelligent person would choose to use all sorts of methods to prevent betrayal. Since you don't trust him, why do you give him such great power? Ren asked curiously instead of trying to refute his evaluation of her. As a succubus, betrayal was as common as eating and drinking to her. Not only succubus, but many demons in the entire Burning Legion didn't think that betrayal was a bad thing. On the contrary, they thought that betrayal was a way to compete with each other. It was healthy and allowed the more capable and talented demons to stand out, especially the Dreadlord, who was simply a professional master in this aspect. Even though they couldn't kill their own kind, they could use all sorts of methods to overthrow their superiors and competitors, allowing them to succeed. It could be said that the entire Nazrizm society was made up of betrayal, lies, deceit, and intimidation. As the first force to be incorporated by the Dark Titan Sargeras, they naturally spread this ideology to the entire Burning Legion, even after the stronger Arita joined. Without a doubt, Zhangqing knew very well what was going on in the minds of these people who seemed to submit to him on the surface. He casually explained, "Power isn't just strength. It has to be attached to a certain social group. Otherwise, it can't be called power. If you think Valeni has a lot of power, think about how he got his power and what groups he's going to use it on." Rin was not a fool. To be exact, if she was a fool, she would not have survived in the cruel and vicious environment of her own kind. She quickly came to a realization and said, "Oh, I get it. He's a human, and the seemingly huge power in his hands is completely given to him by you. So if he dares to betray you in the slightest, be it us or those creatures called demons, we will tear him to pieces without hesitation." That's right. The art of ruling and balancing power was to never let one's subordinates obtain unrestricted power. Instead, one had to place those who seemed to pose the greatest threat in the positions that were most likely to be hated by others. You have to understand that once the soil is lost, even the most lush trees will wither and die. How pitiful. I'm suddenly starting to sympathize with him. Succubus's delicate face revealed a gloating smile. All right, that's all for the discussion about Valeni. You just need to know that he's not a threat, at least not yet. Tell me, how's the investigation going? Zhang Cheng pushed away the two restless hands of Succubus. Sorry, Master. There's no clues so far. After all, the things you want to investigate are too old. Most of the demons here are less than 500 years old. It's difficult to find any useful information. If you don't mind, I can send someone to the hinterland and find a way to get some useful information from the veteran demon lords. When it came to business, Ren immediately put away her cynical look and reported her progress in the fastest and most concise language. After spending so much time together, she clearly understood her master's character very well. She did not dare to do anything out of line at this moment. It was no different from courting death. Nothing at all. Zhang Cheng frowned subconsciously. Really nothing. The only thing I'm sure of is that there's a poem circulating among the demons. I don't know if it's a story or a prophecy, but it's very similar to what you're looking for. Succubus quickly replied, "Continue to investigate, at all costs. Also, inform Polak to restrain all the members of the army. Make sure they stay absolutely quiet during this period. Don't go out to provoke or cause trouble." After that, Zhang Cheng waved his hand and signaled his men to leave. "As you wish, my great and evil master." Ren placed one hand on her chest and bowed deeply, completely ignoring the large part of her chest that was exposed. As the shadow and dark energy began to spread rapidly in this world, she was no longer the simple elite succubus, but a real succubus queen. Her powerful strength was not inferior to the tyrannical abyssal lord. But for some reason, she was still the same as before. She preferred to use underhanded means to achieve her goals, and rarely exposed her true strength. However, none of this had anything to do with Zhang Cheng. After watching the succubus leave, he immediately took out a blood-red diamond-shaped mark from his pocket and muttered to himself in a voice that only he could hear, "The tomb where the demon king from ancient times sleeps? Hope it won't disappoint me too much." Without a doubt, what he wanted Ren to find was nothing else but the entrance to a tomb. According to Valeni, the other side of the duality of the power of creation was hidden in this tomb, which was the mystery of the power of destruction. But the problem was, due to some unknown factors, it was impossible to accurately predict the corresponding location, and could only use the most primitive and inefficient method to find it. Of course, Zhang Cheng privately thought that this was more like a lousy excuse. It should be noted that the relationship between the two had been mutually using and wary of each other from the beginning. Although Valeni deliberately put himself in a weak position, no one knew what was in his mind. Even the psionic ability could not penetrate the strange protection around his body 24 hours a day. There was no doubt that this old man was not as weak as he said. On the contrary, in the field of mysticism, he was a truly difficult opponent. He had a lot of knowledge and energy that even Zhang Cheng could not understand. Most importantly, so far, Valeni's every prediction in the process of expansion had been 100% successful. The actions and choices of hundreds of demon lords were exactly as he predicted. It was like playing a real-time strategy game, directly cheating and canceling the fog of war across the map. Chapter 8:13. War was an act of collective and mutual violence. Usually in the human world, it was seen as an extension of politics, an extreme act to compete for resources or some kind of interests. However, most humans did not know that when the environment changed, for example, when it rose to the height of competing for the survival of a race, it would undergo extremely incredible changes. The most obvious one was no longer to think about the situation from a rational point of view. Instead, no matter what price they had to pay, even if they had to die together, they would drag the enemy who destroyed them along with them. There was no doubt that for heaven and hell, the relationship between the two was like this, and it was even more intense than any description in words. After all, whether it was angels or demons, their lifespan was far longer than that of ordinary people, especially the higher-ups who firmly occupied the ruling position. They would never forget the earth-shattering war in ancient times, as well as the painful losses they had suffered. Although with the conclusion of the peace treaty, or rather the conclusion of the armistice agreement, both sides ushered in a long period of peace, but private little actions never stopped, and many conflicts almost led the result to the edge of a full-scale war. Therefore, it was far easier to make heaven and hell go to war again than many people thought. In less than 2 weeks, Zhang Cheng received a piece of information sent back by the Fear Lord who had infiltrated the demons. The content was also very simple. Not long ago, a group of more than 5,000 angels invaded the border between heaven and hell. Not only did they slaughter all the demons in the 2 neighboring territories, but they also piled up the bodies of the dead into the shape of a pyramid and inserted the bloody war flag with the symbol of humiliation at the top. Even a fool knew that this kind of behavior would anger the higher-ups of the demons who were already easily enraged. If nothing unexpected happened, it would not take long for more demons to cross the border and kill in the sphere of influence of heaven, making up for the losses with interest. As for the following plot, naturally, both sides would retaliate, gradually expanding the scale of the conflict until it was unbearable and a full-scale war broke out. But they would not know that, in fact, the ones who stirred up the trouble were not others, but those fear lords who were good at disguising and deceiving. It seems that the plan is going well, isn't it? Zhang Cheng raised his head and looked into Valeni's eyes. Going well. The latter sneered and shook his head. It's going smoothly now because the higher-ups of hell think that we are a new force that rose from the barren land and are demons like them. I guarantee that once they discover the true identity of you and your subordinates, they will quickly reach a truce agreement with heaven, and then turn around to launch a full-scale attack. Who knows, the angels might even be involved. You're playing with fire, a fire that might lead to a fatal disaster. Then don't let the enemy discover you. I believe you can do it. Zhang Cheng obviously did not take the other's warning to heart and shrugged nonchalantly. There was no way he was going to tell them how much he had prepared for this war. There were hundreds of thermonuclear warheads that weighed tens of millions of tons, which were more than enough to easily change the direction of a decisive battle. Even if those so-called demon kings were to personally enter the battlefield, the outcome would still be the same. Damn it, are you trying to tire me to death? Warrant protested with a look of dissatisfaction. But Zhang Cheng did not care at all and responded bluntly, No, I'm just letting you do what you're best at. In addition, in order to avoid exposing our true intentions as much as possible, I will temporarily leave hell for a while, and you will be fully in charge. Leave? What if the demons send someone to issue a conscription order? You know, if heaven and hell really go to war, we can't stay out of it. Valeni asked vigilantly. Don't worry, my little pet will take care of everything for you. With that said, Zhang Cheng cast his gaze to the corner of the palace. Without saying a word, Rin picked up the whip in her hand and fiercely whipped Nissa, who had a collar around her neck and was crawling on the ground like a dog. Slap! Woo! Accompanied by the crisp sound of the whip hitting the skin, the female demon immediately let out a cry that was a mixture of pain and pleasure, enough to stimulate the hormone secretion of all male creatures. Lowly bitch, didn't you hear your master calling you? Succubus raised its goat-like hooves and stomped on Nissa's head. Woof, woof, woof. Nissa was obviously terrified and immediately barked like a dog, her eyes full of fear and fawning. It was not that she did not want to speak, but that she had been deprived of the ability to speak and could only use extremely humiliating barks to express her meaning. As a female demon lord, Nissa had never feared a human as much as she did now. No. In her eyes, the harmless-looking young man sitting on the chair could no longer be called a human, because the other party was more sinister, cunning, vicious, cruel, and cold-hearted than any demon she knew. To be precise, she felt that it would not be an exaggeration to hang all the words that could be used to describe evil on the other party's head. Ah, I seem to have forgotten to remove the curse on you. After appreciating the barking for a while, Zhang Cheng pretended to be suddenly enlightened and then raised his hand and snapped his fingers. Instantly, Nissa felt that the power that was constantly tormenting her body suddenly disappeared. She jumped up from the ground and stuck to the wall behind her, shouting crazily, "No, please let me go. I don't want to die. I could do anything for you." Am I that scary? Zhang Cheng blinked innocently. Of course, Master. Your evil and temperamental nature fascinates me. Ren licked her alluring red lips. It was obvious that she was praising and flattering him in disguise. But unfortunately, Zhang Cheng wasn't interested in this at all. He directly stood up and came to the front of the female devil. He raised his hand and gently stroked her cheek, comforting her in a soft voice. Relax, don't be afraid. Don't forget that we are close allies. As long as you obediently do what I ask of you, I can guarantee that not only will you recover your previous position, but you will also receive more. I can recover my previous position? A glimmer of light flashed in Nissa's dim eyes. That's right. You should know that I am a generous person, especially to those friends who have made great contributions. I often do not hesitate to give generous rewards. But the question is, do you have the courage to deceive the entire hell? While saying this, Zhang Cheng leaned close to the female demon's ear, his voice so soft that only the two of them could hear. I can, as long as I can return to my previous position. I am willing to be a complete traitor. Very good. I'll look forward to your performance. Come. Wonderful Book House. Chapter 814. The scorching summer had just passed, and North America ushered in a refreshing autumn breeze. However, it was of no use to the simple people of New York. The poor were as poor as the poor, and the rich bankers on Wall Street, as always, used the financial hegemony of the United States to extract the wealth created by the workers all over the world. Even the public security was no different. It was rumored that the New York Police Commissioner would happily open champagne to celebrate if he didn't hear a shooting or murder report for 24 hours. But most ordinary people didn't know how many terrible undercurrents were hidden under all this normal surface. In fact, ever since Zhang Cheng became the actual ruler of the entire New York State's underground world, many things had become complicated. In particular, he had disappeared into thin air for several months without showing his face. This made many ambitious people a little restless. After all, the position of the North American Supreme Council was quite tempting. Once one sat on it, they would immediately stand at the top of supernatural forces, whether it was wealth, knowledge, strength, or power. Of course, because it hadn't been long since the last purge and the unscrupulous slaughter of the vampires, for the time being, no one dared to jump out and provoke the order he established before he left. As for the small fries who wanted to take advantage of the chaos, to do some damage or make some money, they had long been cleaned up by the lords and knights who swore allegiance to them. Right now, the entire New York's underground world was like a volcano that was about to erupt. The slightest external factor would trigger a violent tremor. However, as the agent of the Catherine's House restaurant, Aisha didn't notice this. She still worked as a bartender on weekdays, dealing with those people who had all kinds of incredible abilities and bloodlines. Occasionally, she would take out the large-caliber magic flintlock hidden under the bar and point it at the heads of those hot-blooded people who lost control of their emotions to help them calm down. To her, this kind of life that was filled with excitement and novelty every day was simply like a dream. After passing a cocktail to a weirdo with snake-like eyes, the girl turned around and asked her good friend, "Zhang isn't back yet?" "No. I asked a lot of people, but no one knows where he went and how long it will take for him to come back." Elizabeth sighed helplessly. She originally planned to invite her boyfriend to the high school prom to spend a wonderful night together and leave the best memories of her life. But who knew that plans could never keep up with changes? Now, not to mention a beautiful night, even to solve their physiological needs, they had to hide under their blankets in the middle of the night and secretly use their fingers to solve it. Especially that kind of indescribable attachment and desire. It was like a nightmare that ravaged his nerves. Don't worry, he's so powerful, so his safety shouldn't be a problem. Oh, I know. Could it be that you can't stand the loneliness anymore? Aisha suddenly leaned forward and teased her in a half-joking tone. Damn it, see if I don't tear your big mouth apart. Elizabeth, who flew into a rage out of humiliation, immediately stood up and wanted to grab her sister's collar. Ha ha, I was right. How about it? Do you want me to share a few tricks that can make you happy, even if you're alone? Aisha had obviously predicted this and quickly retreated, leaving her best friend to miss. Elizabeth rolled her eyes in annoyance. Come on, you should know that this isn't a simple physiological problem. It's a supernatural power, an extremely powerful magic. Well, don't think too much. After all, you already have everything that all girls dream of: wealth, power, beauty, and a powerful and mysterious boyfriend. I can't believe that the ugly duckling at home back then has turned into a white swan. Saying this, Aisha calmly poured some soda water into her empty wine glass instead of the dazzling wine in the cabinet. I don't need you to remind me. I understand. Elizabeth shook her head in annoyance. Moreover, it's not that I'm not satisfied. I just feel a little lonely. How about we find an interesting mission to do together to pass the time? Do a mission? Are you crazy? All the missions here are quite dangerous. You might even lose your life. Aisha widened her eyes in shock. Relax. Have you forgotten that I'm no longer an ordinary girl, but a powerful witch with enough ability to deal with danger? For some reason, Elizabeth suddenly became interested. Similar to all the young people who suddenly obtained supernatural powers, she also wanted to find an opportunity to test how powerful she was, and, at the same time, gain a deeper understanding of the underground world. No matter what, it was impossible to find a proper job in America after graduating from high school, and with a lack of relevant professional knowledge, it was basically impossible to start a business. If she didn't want to be a useless person waiting for death, her only choice was to enter the dangerous underground world and use her supernatural powers to find work. Are you serious? Aisha tried to confirm again. Very serious. I have Cody. I won't encounter any danger. Elizabeth touched the unknown black furry creature that was lying on the chair and dozing off. Meow, meow, meow. The black furry ball made a cat-like sound, as if asking why she pulled it along. Aisha, of course, knew how powerful this little monster called Cody was. She frowned and hesitated for a few minutes before finally taking out an envelope from under the bar. Here, take it. There's detailed information about the mission inside. According to the rules, you have 3 days. If you don't complete it in 3 days, the mission will be considered a failure. As for me, I have to keep an eye on this place. I don't have time to play adventure games with you. I know the rules. Thanks. I'll treat you to a big meal at the best restaurant when I get my reward. Elizabeth kissed her sister's cheek fiercely, picked up her number 1 fighter, Cody, and ran quickly in the direction of the exit. At the same time, Zhang Cheng, who had just returned from hell, was standing at the entrance of the villa, staring at the crocodiles and hippopotamuses floating in the swimming pool, as well as the lions, tigers, leopards, bears, and other beasts that were yawning in boredom in the living room. He couldn't understand how his house had turned into a zoo in just a few months after he left, and these carnivores were all in a free-range state. Who can tell me what happened? While he was still in a daze, an invisible servant seemed to have noticed something. It immediately rushed out of the house and circled around its creator. "Stop!" Zhang Cheng gave the order without hesitation, and then stuck a finger into the servant's body, directly reading the memories stored inside. After a while, an expression of not knowing whether to laugh or cry appeared on his face, and he muttered to himself, "So it's to choose a battle pet? It seems that Elizabeth has improved her abilities quite a bit during my absence. She can actually strengthen and control multiple targets." Chapter 8:15. Go away. Zhang Cheng wasn't the kind of person who liked wild animals. He directly invaded the brain of a lion that tried to get close to him and made it obediently retreat to the corner. Then he took out his phone and dialed one of the numbers. In just a few seconds, the voice of Leonid, the head of the intelligence agency, came through the phone. "Hello, boss, is that you?" "Yes. I haven't seen you for a long time. Don't tell me you've forgotten about me." Zhang Cheng joked with a rare smile. With the plan in hell going smoothly, he could finally relax a little and give his tense nerve a break. "How could that be? I will never forget that it was you who gave me everything I have today. Do you know? To be able to once again summon the wind and rain in the intelligence world and scare those damn bastards of the CIA out of their wits is simply the biggest dream of my life." Leonid's tone revealed an unconcealable excitement. Obviously, during this period of time, he had successfully established a huge intelligence network, and with the advantages brought by magic and advanced technology, he had dealt with the world's largest intelligence agency many times. Perhaps he had even taught them a lesson. Since the collapse of the Soviet Union, the only intelligence organization that could compete with the CIA, the KGB, had fallen into a state of collapse. Therefore, the United States could be said to have easily seized control of most of the regional intelligence networks in the world. Naturally, it was impossible to allow a new organization that was at least 15 to 20 years more advanced than any other country to rise up. But unfortunately, no matter how powerful they were, when they encountered an elite action team that could launch an attack and retreat at any time through teleportation devices and invisible Quinjet fighters, they simply couldn't make use of their absolute technological advantage like before. Coupled with the popularization of lie detection devices, it was often easy to find out if there was a spy infiltrated from the inside. Therefore, the world only knew that a powerful intelligence organization of unknown origin had joined the dangerous game, but no one knew which country was behind the organization. After all, according to normal logic, an organization like this that had the most basic firearms and bullets with extremely high technological content must have a complete industrial and technological system behind it. And the system couldn't be completed by one or two rich companies. Only a country and an industrial and technological powerhouse could meet the minimum requirements. As the initiator, Zhang Cheng had obviously expected this situation. He asked directly, "Tell me, how many people do you have in Iraq? Can you take care of a more troublesome thing for me?" "We have about 12 professional intelligence personnel in Iraq, 2 action teams, and more than 400 peripheral mercenaries. In theory, we can solve most emergencies." Leonid quickly gave a specific number. "Oh, sounds like it's developing well." Zhang Cheng's eyes flashed with a hint of surprise. It was not easy to build an intelligence network that covered the whole world from scratch, especially when infiltrating a country like Iraq, which had just gone through a real war and was full of internal turmoil and danger. Leonid explained, "It's not only well, it's not bad. We make $4 to $6 million a month in the Middle East, including oil, intelligence, weapons, medicine, daily necessities, drugs, and so on. There are also several restaurants and hotels in downtown Baghdad that are under our indirect control. Even if the USA, of course, of the U. War, pain, hatred, chaos, and death. I didn't expect you to act so fast. But don't worry, before that place becomes completely chaotic, help me find a few archaeology and geology experts. I need to identify an ancient map," Zhang Cheng said as he sent a high-definition photo of the parchment map over the satellite network. In less than 2 or 3 seconds, Leonid received the picture. He glanced at it and immediately promised, "Please rest assured, within a week, I will give you a satisfactory answer." "Very good. I'll wait for your news." Zhang Cheng had never doubted the ability of the other party. He quickly hung up the phone. In any case, the current Iraq was not the country that had experienced a decade or two of war and was ravaged by all kinds of mercenaries and extremist religious terrorists. There were still many experts and professors in some museums and universities, so it should not be a problem to get a map. Once the location was confirmed, he would immediately set off to see what the real seal looked like. At the same time, in the secret underground base in the Pacific Ocean, Leonid quickly passed on the task. After a while, the information of more than a dozen archaeologists and geologists in Iraq was sent back. After a simple selection, he quickly locked on to two of them. Without turning his head, he said to the girl standing behind him, "Yelena, immediately take this map and personally go to Iraq. Remember, you must be fast. I don't want anything to go wrong." "Yes, sir." The young girl, who looked like a Lolita, immediately stood at attention and performed a standard Soviet military salute. But just as she was about to turn around and leave, Leonid seemed to remember something. He raised his hand and stopped her. "Wait, there is one more thing. Recently, the CIA has been too quiet. It's so quiet that it makes me nervous. If there is enough time, by the way, go and clean up our intelligence personnel in Iraq and see if anyone betrayed the organization." "Understood. No matter who it is, as long as they dare to betray us, I will make them regret being born in this world." Yelena's eyes flashed with a trace of coldness. If there was anyone who had the highest loyalty in the entire intelligence organization, it would undoubtedly be someone like her, who followed Leonid to hide in South America for several years. Because these people had experienced a life like stray dogs, without a background, without a home. They had all day longed for fear of being recognized as spies of the KGB. Living this kind of life for a long time simply made them mentally collapse. Therefore, if someone dared to destroy their current stable life, they would not hesitate to use the cruelest punishment to let the traitor understand that death was not the most terrifying thing. Sometimes it was a kind of beautiful relief. At least they could escape the pain and torture. Do you still remember our old rules? Don't be stingy. Take it out when necessary. When Leonid said this sentence, the corner of his mouth slightly raised, revealing a chilling smile. Anyone who saw this smile subconsciously shivered and began to secretly pray for the intelligence personnel stationed in Iraq, praying that none of them betrayed them. Otherwise, it would be best to shoot themselves in the head before the interrogation began. The sooner they died, the sooner they would be reincarnated. Chapter 816. After hanging up the phone, Zhang Cheng began to survey the few wild animals in the living room with a troubled look. He didn't know how they had gotten their hands on them. According to his habit, the best way to deal with these animals with low intelligence and no special abilities was to destroy them humanely. He would directly disintegrate them into harmless dust particles and scatter them with the wind. After all, he was not an animal conservationist, and he never thought that wild animals were worth protecting. The survival of the fittest was originally a part of the evolution process of life. If an animal could not adapt to the changes and destruction of the environment by human beings, it meant that it was eliminated. Naturally, other creatures would fill its position in the food chain. But considering that Elizabeth might use some of them, Zhang Cheng finally held back and hurried them to a room on the right side of the corridor on the first floor. After doing all this, he lazily lay on the sofa in the living room and looked at the missed calls and messages during the time he was away. Soon, an inconspicuous piece of information piqued his interest. Just when he was about to call to ask about the specific situation, the magical energy in the air suddenly fluctuated violently. Then, a familiar figure directly tore through the space and drilled out from the other side. You're finally back, my friend." Faust put one hand on his chest and slightly bowed. This strange person, who had the title of the strongest necromancer, was now paler than a few months ago. If not for the fact that his internal organs were still working as usual, he was no different from a corpse that came back from the dead. "How did you know that I'm back?" Zhang Cheng asked with a little surprise. One had to know that he had just left hell not long ago. So far, he had not met anyone, and the various evasion spells on his body were enough to resist all kinds of magic detection. It's very simple. Through your mobile phone. I found that every time you disappeared inexplicably, your mobile phone was always switched off or unreachable. But as soon as you came back, it would immediately connect to the communication network. Faust explained with a grin. He had to admit that this answer was both unexpected and reasonable. Zhang Cheng pretended to be helpless and sighed. Well, it seems that you found out a little secret of mine, didn't you? Tell me what's so urgent. Faust shook his head with a smile. No, it's nothing urgent. On the contrary, I'm here to tell you a piece of good news. The corpse of the goddess has been completed. She's one of the top 3 masterpieces among all my creations. In order to express my gratitude to you for taking the initiative to give up the competition, I've decided to give you a book that records the mysteries of death. The mystery of death. Zhang Cheng's eyes lit up with anticipation when he heard these words. When he was in the world of Harry Potter, he had caused a global thermonuclear war and used billions of people to get a glimpse of the secrets of the law of death. But who would have thought that it would be interrupted by a strange ball of light in the end? Yes, the mystery of death. I can feel that in essence, you and I are the same kind of people. We are both obsessed with knowledge and power. Trust me, this book won't disappoint you. As he spoke, Faust gently placed a dirty and old book on the table. The pages were dark brown in color, and he left a meaningful smile. His entire body gradually became transparent and finally disappeared. Feeling the dense aura of death emanating from the book, Zhang Cheng frowned subconsciously. He took the initiative to reach out his right hand to flip to the first page and see what was written inside. The moment his fingertips touched the cover of the book, the pages of the book suddenly flipped by themselves with a rustling sound. Before he could react to what was going on, he found that there was a force that pulled him into another world, a world that was completely composed of spirit and consciousness. This is... Zhang Cheng's eyes widened as he looked around. At a glance, all he could see were dead trees without leaves. The visibility was very low, and it gave him a very strong hint of death. What is death? A shadow, shrouded in a gray cloak, suddenly appeared out of thin air and questioned loudly. Who are you? Where is this place? Not only did Zhang Cheng not answer the question, but he also asked his own question. Unfortunately, the shadow obviously did not intend to answer any questions, or it could be said that it did not have the ability to answer questions. It just kept asking, what is death? Every time it spoke, the whole dead forest would produce a creepy echo, as if there was something hidden in the depths. Damn it, I think I'm in trouble. Zhang Cheng complained in annoyance. Obviously, this secret book was not a book at all. It was a connection point, a teleportation key that directly pulled the consciousness of the person who touched the pages of the book into this mysterious space. Most importantly, he was not sure if there was any difference in the flow of time between the two worlds. If the flow of time in the real world was static, then it would be fine. But if the flow of time in the real world was similar to that of the real world, then the unconscious body would be in a very dangerous and unprotected state. As a person who maintained a certain level of vigilance in everything, this was no different from a fish lying on the chopping board that was waiting to be slaughtered. And because the whole world was made up of consciousness, Zhang Cheng did not bring any equipment or magic items in, so the only thing he could rely on now was his own mind. What is death? The shadow came up to him again and asked tirelessly. Death is the end of life. It is the final destination of the world and everything in the universe. Nothing can escape the final death. Even death itself is no exception. Zhang Cheng hesitated for a moment and then quickly explained his own understanding of death. You think death is the end of everything? Then what is after the end? The shadow did not repeat the previous question this time, but instead asked a new question. After the end? Zhang Cheng narrowed his eyes and fell into deep thought once again. There was no doubt that there were only two purposes for this kind of question. One was to drive people crazy, and the other was to make people think deeply until they found the correct answer. Of course, if the person who answered the question was not smart enough, or did not have enough knowledge, the possibility of being driven crazy was also very high. After all, you would never know if the person who made this kind of thing was more inclined to the rational materialism or more inclined to the emotional idealism. This was the definition of death. There were often two kinds of philosophical and physiological aspects. The latter emphasized the external characteristics of the various organs of the body, while the former emphasized the abstract spirit. It was not only used to describe living things, but also used in other places. Come, wonderful book house. Come.